So welcome everybody to the Finance Committee meeting. It's August 29th, 7 p.m. Before we begin, I'll just go over a couple of things. One, this meeting is being recorded, so please be careful not to put anything up on your screen that you don't want caught by the recording. Secondly, all votes tonight, if we take any for Finance Committee, will be done by a roll call vote. And in terms of participation from those outside of the Finance Committee, we do generally allow that in our meetings. We're pretty freeform about it. If you just, if you're on Zoom with us, please use the raise hand function if you want to speak, or raise your hand so I can see it, or, you know, generally just call out and we'll try to accommodate. However, this is a meeting for the Finance Committee, so you know, I may ask that you keep it brief, or we may move on at my discretion as the chair. So, okay, starting out, we are going to be discussing the 61 Summer Street lease. For anyone that is unfamiliar, that is the art space, what is now the art space building, used to be a school, the old Fowler School. The property is owned by the town of Maynard. It is leased by ArtSpace. And there was something else I was going to say. Oh, if you're unfamiliar with board docs, I'm going to mention that a lot of the things we speak about tonight, I'll probably put some of it up on the screen, but I won't put all of it. All of the correspondence and the PDFs and everything that's been shared about what we're discussing is on board docs. And if you're not familiar with how to access that, if you go to the Maynard, Mass website and you go to the government tab at the top and you find the Finance Committee, we have our own page, and then you scroll down a little bit into the meetings section, and you click on Finance Committee meetings and minutes, and then right at the top, it says, please note the Finance Committee documents are also available on board docs. And so if you click on that, that will take you to our area on board docs. You might be more familiar with it with the select board. It's all one, you know, database, but you access them, you know, in various ways. But if you're used to going through select board, go ahead and do that. And then there's a little tab on the side of board docs that you can switch over to FinCom. So for anyone who wants to follow along on anything we're looking at, that's where it'll be. To start off the discussion tonight, I don't have a particular, I guess, agenda for the discussion. We had discussed amongst the FinCom a bit the process that went through the select board to do a new lease with ArtSpace, and some members of FinCom just had some questions about that process, the RFP process, and also some of the decision making that went into moving ahead with a lease for ArtSpace to continue to be in that building. A lot of that was done in executive session, so there is quite a bit that can't really be discussed openly. Greg is here tonight and will help us with that. Oh, sorry, I forgot to do one thing. Before we get started, I do need to just go through the Finance Committee members and make sure everyone is present and here to participate via Zoom. So let me do that real quick before we say anything else. Katie, I'm going to go to you first.
Yes.
Okay. Ken?
Yes.
Danielle?
Yes.
Kevin?
Present.
Peter?
Yes.
Jillian?
Yes.
Okay. And I know, Greg, you're here for discussion with us, so, and you're all good. And Lori, you're here and good. Okay, great. Sorry. Forgot to do that at the beginning. So, so in terms of where to go from here, I guess I would open it to members of my committee after seeing the things that I have sent and that are posted. If you, and I brought Greg and Lori here to answer some questions. So I will open it up to you all if you have anything that you would like to ask or that you know, want clarification on or that we can discuss.
So could I go first, Alana?
Yes, go for it, Ken.
So since I was the one who brought up the issue. This is less about what the ultimate decision will be and more about how the decision is made. Or recognizing the fact that there are lease negotiations that would typically take place in an executive session, and appropriately so. That's one of the allowed purposes of executive session. The lease negotiation itself would be, but the decision to engage in a lease versus other possible uses for the building, is not an appropriate use of executive session. Those kind of discussions should be taking place in open session. So you have a piece of town property, you're making a decision on how to use it. Those discussions ought to be taking place. Now, if they result in a decision to renew the lease, then that's fine. That's a decision certainly the select board could take. But those discussions where the various factors are weighed should be taking place in open session, and they haven't been. By taking place in open session, it allows people with different perspectives to come in. But frankly, even more importantly, it helps everyone across the Maynard community understand the decision process whereby a town property is leased for a particular purpose. So, if you took another example of some town property where the discussion about the disposition of that property, let's set aside art space for a moment, and let's just take some piece of government of town property. If that discussion about how the property was going to be disposed of took place in a closed in an executive session, then that would be improper. We would, none of us would accept that. That's not an appropriate use. That's not an allowed use for an executive session. And so my point was that, from a strategic perspective, if the select board is making a decision on how to dispose of the property, that's certainly their responsibility to do so. So we're not trying to suggest that that's not their role. What we're saying is that role has to take place in open session. And our communication from our last meeting was simply a request, a reminder that discussion ought to be taking place in open session on how that property was to be disposed of, to allow other people to suggest other possible uses that might have a greater advantage to the town. And that's really what it came down to. My sense was that the reaction was, well, the Board of Selectmen has a responsibility and a right to dispose of town property, and so we're going to continue to do so. That wasn't the point at all. The point was that the disposition discussion has to take place in open session, even if the actual negotiation, once a decision was made that that the select board was going to execute a lease, then certainly that lease could take place in executive session. But up until that point, that ought to be happening in open session. Hence, that was the motivation behind the encouragement of the Finance Committee on behalf of town meeting voters to engage in that discussion around disposition of the property in an open meeting.
Okay, that was good to get us started. Good explaining up until this point, sort of what we discussed. I guess one thing I did want to ask, maybe Greg, you know the answer, or possibly Peter, because I think maybe you've been on longest. When that property first stopped being a school and was going to be kept by the town, and there was a town meeting vote on doing so, correct? On leasing it? Does anyone remember?
That was more than 20.
I don't know.
That was,
Okay.
I have,
I think it even predates me, so.
Okay,
I can't say. I'm not sure. I don't
Okay.
know.
I was just wondering about the history behind when it first went up to be leased, and if there were any sort of restrict, because you can say like, yes, we want to keep this and we want to lease it, but we want it to be used for certain purposes, like.
Yeah, you can, well, you don't need a town meeting vote to do that either. So
Right,
it's already,
but-
it's already owned. So, so the town is not giving up ownership of it. So
Right.
it is a disposition, but typically things go to town meeting because in all likelihood, the town is considering no longer owning a property.
An
But-
example of that would be the Coolidge property that
Right.
was being sold, and that is that is the town saying, okay, we will no longer own this property.
Yep.
Right, I was sort of wondering if there was basically the same type of vote, except the vote was that we want to keep it and lease it. Or,
Yeah, I'm not sure.
like the town said, no, we don't want to sell this property, we want to keep it.
I actually wouldn't be surprised if it didn't require a town meeting vote because the select board just decides to retain the property. Because it was already ours, just like any other
Yeah.
property. Like it
Right,
decided.
so they wouldn't be necessary.
Probably not, but
Okay,
if I find out.
No, the select board is able to dispose of the property through a lease. If they decide to sell the property, then that would, my understanding is would engage in, a town meeting vote, because the select board at that point. The question again is not whether they can engage in a lease. The point is that the decision to engage in a lease is something that needs to be discussed in open meeting. Even if the negotiation, at the discussions about the negotiation themselves take place quite properly in executive session.
So, Madam Chair,
Yep.
can I ask a question? And I
Sure.
think it's directly to Ken. Ken, is that how you read the open meeting law? Is that you're saying should or is that how you, only because, and this is not a leading question. I'm trying to say, like, is that how you interpret the open meeting law? That's
But frankly, I don't think it's a matter of interpretation. If you take a look at the appropriate uses of executive session, it certainly talks about, the discussions around negotiation of a lease, just like it does around union contracts and stuff like that. But the decision itself to, that you're going to dispose of the property this way, which would, I would think appropriately involve a decision that, based on what the town wants to do, this is how we're going to dispose of that. But I don't think that this is a matter of interpretation. I think, there are specific purposes for that, for which an executive session is allowed. And a decision on the disposition of the property is not one of them.
So the select board will have to approve a contract, in this case, a lease agreement, which, as the chief procurement officer, I have within my authority to propose a new lease agreement, as this current one is expiring at the end of December. So I just went through the procurement process. Admittedly, through the executive session, I was received guidance from the executive, from select board. But then eventually that lease agreement will have to be
I understand
approved in public, and so
We're not talking about the lease agreement. We're talking about the decision.
That's
the
true, but right
decision
now
made to dispose.
but technically the decision has not been made yet. Like, they have not approved a new lease. So right now, at the end, by January 1st of 2023,
Are-
it is not owned, like right, it's not, there's no lease agreement.
Yeah, but I guess what I would say is, and neither is the select board engaging in a public way in a discussion of other options that might include, sale of the property or what have you. And I'm just saying there is the Maynard community has a lot of people in it, more than just, are depending on the lease of the building. And so that's why, I think, it was viewed at that the decision around about the disposition. Now, if the select board were going to go through the discussion of the lease and then say, okay, now we have this lease in hand. Now let's take a look at all the various options that we have, including this lease that we're ready to execute. Then, that would be certainly appropriate. But, what I heard out of the discussion in the meeting was at least one select board member saying that discussion about disposition of the property and other options was something that was discussed in the executive session. And I'm just saying that ought to happen in an open meeting.
Okay.
Justine, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Hi, I just had a quick question. I think kind of Greg and Ken, because I'm trying to understand the concern about the lease agreement. Sorry about that. So when we just renewed our lease with Sterling Management for the golf course, right? We went through, Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, but we went through a pretty similar process.
Yep.
So Ken, was there a problem with us going through that process?
You're on mute, Ken.
Thank you. I'd have to take a look at how that is. I would guess not, because I think there's a decision about a golf course and the options on that golf course in terms of what can be done with that golf course are rather limited. I would hope
really.
that, I'm sorry?
Not really. I mean, we could sell the golf course
Well,
Well, it's held in CPC though. So
right
we
now.
can't-
Yes.
Yeah,
So,
right.
so again, my point is if there's a property that a decision is being discussed about how to dispose of that property, not dispose in the technical term. In other words, are we going to lease it? Are we going to sell it? Are we going to maintain it for town uses? The disposition of the property, that discussion has to take place in open meeting. Now, once a decision is made and decisions, for example, is made to lease, to go to Sterling, and the specific terms and conditions of that lease are being negotiated, that is an appropriate use of executive session. But the decision on pros and cons of selling or keeping or leasing or what have you, that's something that has to be done in an open meeting. And that's what we were trying to encourage be done relative to the art space buildings. Here is, again, bring it in an open meeting, discuss the various options of what the possibilities are, and open this up to the town so that members of the town meeting voters, could sit there and say, yep, we love having art space there. Or given the budget situation, we feel as though we ought to do something different with that property to get it, say, onto the tax rolls, to sell it, get the money for the proceeds of it, and put it on the tax roll, or other options that were there. those discussions have to take place in open meeting.
Does it work? You have used it.
Any other replies or thoughts to that?
I do have some questions, Alana, but
Sure.
on a slightly different topic. So I
Okay.
want to give people the opportunity to wrap up this topic before I move on to the next one.
All right, Alana, can I
go
just
ahead.
ask?
Yeah.
And I'm sorry if I missed something, but was there something that went out besides the email from Priscilla? Or that's the only thing I saw about this.
Yeah, there should be. I hope I sent it. I hope I sent it out. I did put it up on board docs. There were questions about the RFP. And so Greg sent all of the, basically, all the public documents when the RFP went out, what it said, and that sort of thing. And that's up on board docs.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, I'm ready to
Yeah,
ask
I
my
think go ahead.
questions if
Yeah.
people don't mind me kind of moving on to a slightly different topic. For starters, my question is for Greg.
Okay.
ArtSpace has been paying the maintenance on that building for 5 years, correct?
I mean, probably longer than that with, like presumably that's been the agreement for 20 some years. With a little bit of exception there, when it flooded 4 years ago, we provided some support. And then we also supported the abatement of the basement floor.
Okay, and was that the asbestos abatement?
That's right.
Okay, so they've actually been paying maintenance for 20 years. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's how long the lease has been.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
All right. And at the time that lease was signed, the limit on the leases was like 30, I believe, correct? And that since then has decreased.
Oh no, I'm sorry. Well, then maybe it was 30 years. I wouldn't have cut short the lease agreement. I don't know. I'm not looking at the lease.
I'm just talking about the statutory limit on like how long towns are allowed to lease
Good
property.
question. 30 sounds right, but I'm not looking at the law. So but that sounds right.
Okay.
Okay.
So our ArtSpace has indeed been paying the maintenance on this building for upwards of at least 20 years, if not more. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
I feel like this is a trap, Kevin. Can you just cut to the chase?
No, I'm just,
what's your point?
I wanted to check because, we received an email that said that they were paying the maintenance for 5 years. And I was like, well, that seems a little bit unusual because typically in like the commercial world, if you're doing a commercial lease where someone's paying the maintenance on a building, that lease lasts at least for 10 to 15 years.
I
Yeah.
think
So-
she was just giving an example of how much they've spent over the last 5 years, just to
Yeah.
give a perspective of
Okay.
the cost. To go back 20 would probably be more of a job, but just a picture of the last 5 years.
Right. That's
Right.
probably true.
All right. I mean, yeah. So I was just trying, I don't know the history of it. I was just trying to get the history. I mean, it's very clear ArtSpace has been paying into that building
Right.
for a significant period of time.
Right. Right.
Okay. So my next question is regarding the request for proposal.
Okay.
Did you make any written determinations regarding the specifications for that proposal?
I don't know what you mean by that. I wrote the specs. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, you wrote the specs. Do you have any like other supporting documentation? Like you made some attestation as to why the requirements were written the way they were?
So in executive session, the select board gave me guidance. I interpreted that guidance into specifications.
Okay. And this
Okay.
and this was was this verbally committed or is this documented somewhere?
I I think verbal. I'm not great about taking notes while people are talking to me. So I think it was probably verbal. And then after the fact, I probably wrote down very quickly what they told me while I'm listening to open meeting, like public comments of a select board meeting before my TA report comes. So don't give me that much credit. It was word for word. That's the point I'm making. I very quickly jotted down.
Those
My
meetings are
my notes
recorded.
are not like, yeah.
Well, there
but-
are executive session
Yes.
meeting minutes.
yeah,
Right,
there's
yeah,
that.
right,
There's
right.
that. Yeah.
And so these requirements were suggested or dictated during executive session. Is that correct?
I can't really get into detail, Kevin, man.
All right, that's fine.
you know?
That's fine. If
All right.
you want to say executive session,
I do. That's
Okay.
how it works.
I know. It's fine.
Okay.
I'm just saying you make sure, if there's any written determination, because I mean, my next question is going to be, so your RFP goes through, has a really long list of requirements.
Yeah.
Of those requirements, how many would you determine that art space would qualify for?
I mean, I did the evaluation criteria, so you'd have to look at that document, which I believe I gave to Alana, and it's uploaded to Board Docs. So you can just look at it. I'm not looking unless they didn't meet the minimum evaluated criteria. Then that means they passed. You know what I'm saying? Like they were considered a reputable, responsive proposal.
Okay. So they were, but you pretty much, I mean, you would pretty much say that given all these requirements that art space would qualify. I mean, obviously, since we're in a lease agreement,
Yeah, I didn't-
in potential lease.
Otherwise, I would have thrown out the bid.
Okay. Are you aware of any other organization that would meet these requirements?
Yeah, probably. I suspect the umbrella from Concord probably would. I think there's an art space similar in Worcester. I mean, but I don't know, man. I put it out to the world, and that's who responded.
Well, I'm a little bit concerned because these requirements seem very specific to art space.
Okay.
And I am concerned that, I mean, look, what I see is when I look at these requirements, I see red flags for bid rigging, otherwise known as bidder exclusion, otherwise known as rig specifications. It's not conclusive, but they are red flags that these requirements seem awfully specific and exclusive to art space compared to any other organization I am aware of.
Okay.
And my concern is that this is a invalid request for proposal. I mean, let me just put it this way: if this proposal was coming across my desk from any other, if I was doing my job, I've been in defense, I've been in finance, and I saw a request for proposal like this, I would be forwarding on to accounting, because I see red flags here for essentially rig specifications, and I'm just raising the red flag. It's not conclusive, but again, these requirements seem awfully specific to art space and awfully exclusive of other opportunities.
Okay. I mean, I didn't receive any bid protest from and town council also provided me the format and also town council approved, so to speak, before I even went public.
Did town council specifically approve these requirements?
Yes.
Okay. All right. That being said,
Yeah,
oh, okay. I'm sorry, Pete. Let me give you
we're off on a different topic here, and I'm concerned about we haven't talked about this aspect of it, and I'm not wild about going too far this way. So,
right.
But I don't want to cut you off, Kevin. But
I did warn you guys I was going to go on a slightly different topic. But if you want
you
me,
also just be more straightforward in asking the question you're raising.
Yeah, please.
About the dramatics.
I mean,
Cavan is concerned that the RFP was written in such a way that it is exclusionary to anyone other than ArtSpace.
Yeah,
That's
I understand
exactly
that,
my
and I'm
concern.
sensitive to
So
that
say
because
that.
I would definitely would rather not have a bid protest go to the AG's office, and I don't.
Right.
I'm confident that is not the case.
Right. So maybe you can clarify that while the process that does have to take place, which involves a public RFP.
Yeah.
But we're not obligated to put out an RFP that basically says, we have a building with this 100 square feet. What do you want to do with it?
We are not.
We
That's a different process.
We are allowed
Yeah.
to say,
Yeah.
we would like this, that, and the other to continue for this building.
Absolutely. That's the advantage of the request for proposals process versus the invitation for bids or the request for qualifications or the request for information. Like the request for proposals allows you to develop evaluative criteria that meets the desires of the procuring entity, and that's what we did.
Right. And so this circles back a little bit to what we were talking about before, which is, in the process of the select board went through an executive session to decide how they wanted this request for proposals to go out. Their decision was to make it relatively specific in what they wanted to see continue happen with that building. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's not like.
I think that's a good inferment, but again, like I can't go into details of what the executive session did.
Right. No. Okay. No, I understand that.
Mhm.
But given what this RFP looks like, we can infer that the decision to write this RFP meant what they wanted to have happen was to continue this as a artistic use building.
That's what it appears to be.
Okay. And to Cavan's point, they are allowed to be that specific. Like, yes, you can't make it.
No, you can't say.
You can't say
is your
it
name
has to be.
Does your names rhyme with smart space?
Right.
Like it has to be.
Right. There certainly are some, right. But
right.
Given that this was reviewed by town council,
Yeah.
that there isn't anything in here that you would hope, because that's town council's job, would go onto the desk of the AG and get us.
I don't think so.
Trouble.
And the AG office tries to be responsive to communities. And so I would suspect I don't know the AG, and but I suspect she would probably defer as long as it was legally within the bounds of procurement law, which I am confident it is. It's probably okay.
All right. No further questions.
Okay.
Can I ask
Yep.
just Alana? I mean, has there been feedback from the select board that they feel they've already done the process Ken talked about, or that the process isn't needed, or that I don't know, that it was kind of with the golf course, to Justine's point before, I guess I'd say if there were some groundswell that said, wait, we don't want a golf course anymore, we've done this for 5 years, we bought it with CPC money, it should be walking trails, then I think it would have been inappropriate for the select board to, forge ahead renewing the lease in the face of questions about it. So I think there are legitimate questions that Ken's raised that, is this, and I like ArtSpace, I really do, and I got nothing against it. And I think if we go through this process, we may well get to ArtSpace is the best thing for the town. But I think Ken is raising a very good thing that, if there's a question that's raised, we shouldn't forge ahead making a decision that binds us one way without having the discussion in a kind of a public manner. So has there been feedback from the select board, or I don't know, Greg, if you have something to add there?
I think the select board
has this already been done, or what?
No,
Sorry.
No, I think the select board very much hears. One, officially they heard it. The finance committee submitted correspondence, and as Ken alluded to, one of the board members did respond. But I think the board is very sympathetic to what you're saying. And and from my perspective, although I am only an advisor to the board, I think they tried to provide a balanced consideration of the future of arts, for the future of art space. And by future of art space, I'm referring to 61 through 63 Summer Street, like that. And as the RFP proposes, right? And then nowhere in the RFP does it say art space. It's all referring to the building itself and the address itself. And that's what they try to consider. Also in consideration, the volume of community members, both within Maynard and outside, that would come to select board meetings, that would submit correspondence to the select board to say, this is what we think you should do with the property. This is how much is important to us, et cetera, et cetera. And the amount of investment that the town has already provided in, and the sort of tie-in of that institution to the cultural district, cultural council, and the entity and the identity of Maynard. The select board hears all that, and they also hear the costs of art space, and they know that the age of art space is what it is, and they're familiar with the sort of constraints, but they're also, I'm just telling you, they are also aware of the opportunity costs by doing a lease as opposed to a sale of the property, and seeing what we can get for the market, whether with the existing structure or otherwise.
And has that discussion taken place in open meeting or an executive session?
I would say, on my understanding, it's been all executive session.
And therein is the problem.
I disagree with you, Ken, because I am reading the AG's office as the guidance on procurement, and it does say to consider. I can read it aloud, but I don't think.
No, it says the executive session allows you to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property if the chair declares that open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the public body. Okay. So the chair has to declare and justify that discussing this in open meeting would have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position.
They did that by the vote. So in the vote, we even say, because the chair so declares that this has a detrimental effect on the negotiation.
You have to justify. You can't just sit there and have a discussion and hide behind this part and say it has a detrimental effect. You have to show, and I would go so far as to say, if you're having a discussion about various options that are before the select board in terms of leasing or selling or what have you, that there is no detrimental effect on the negotiating position, because at that point you're not negotiating a lease.
It does. Ken, if you start talking about the value of a property and then you're showing your hand early. So if you say like, well, we don't have to do a lease, we can do this other thing, then a proposing entity knows what you have and what you're considering. And they know what you have to negotiate for or not, or what you're not willing to negotiate for.
Okay, that actually makes a lot of sense to me, Greg, in that earlier when you talked about, and Justine, I see your hand and I will get to you. When you said, they can get the lease all set and then before it is signed, sealed, done, come to an open meeting to discuss it.
They will do that.
Which seems, I think, a little, what I'm hearing, it seems a little backwards. Like you would think what you would do is decide what to do first before putting everyone through a lease negotiation to decide that we want to do a lease negotiation. But what you're saying is this could actually be more beneficial to everyone involved, because we don't want to have certain things out in public about the building perhaps that might then be detrimental to our case for the lease.
That's right, at the determination of the chair. So but I would have advised, as guess what I did, that to talk about everything in executive session, which again, I'm only the advisor, right? So if the board decided not to do that, then that's up to them. But I think they did it the correct way in so far as what I felt like I was advising them into what they want to accomplish. But
right. Justine, did you want to follow up?
I think Greg made a lot of the points. So it was more, to the concern of, the position of negotiation and determining what could affect lease negotiations. So that was my point as well.
Okay. And I don't want to put you totally on the spot exactly, but you're here, so I'm kind of gonna. So is it your understanding that once the lease has been negotiated, but not yet finalized as if this is what is happening, but the lease has been negotiated, that it would then be brought to a public meeting of the select board in hand to be seen before it becomes what is going to happen? And at that point, there can be discussion about it and the future of the building?
So I don't know as if we've discussed how much of that, and Greg helped me with this, how much of that we've discussed in public, and I am only one person, but I have no problem with that. I think that, once everything has been crafted and that part of it has moved forward, I would say one thing about our board is we do a lot of research, obviously, as your board does. And so there's a lot of thought that's gone into this, and unfortunately we can't go into it right now, but I would be happy to explain to the town voters so they would understand the reason for the decisions that we are looking to make.
Right.
Yeah.
So the decision will have to be made public, like the board
Yeah.
will have to approve it in public. And then at that time, if the board, whatever the board, if the board decides to do a deliberation to consider whether they actually want to go through with the lease, they can. Or if they decide to change their minds, they can do that too. It's unlikely, but the board will be an open session approval.
Sorry, if I can chime in for a second, Alana.
Yeah, go for it.
I guess I don't have much basis to, comment on the legality, if that's the right term, whether open meeting and what it's supposed to cover. I guess my general thought would be, just as not a legal thing, but as a good idea thing, would be to encourage the Board of Selectmen that, it's to do that discussion that you're referring to, Alana, with the lease in hand, kind of presupposes what the decision is going to be. And I still think Ken is raising a good point that, this is town resource. It should be evaluated, and we should know before we get into lease negotiations, why we're getting into lease negotiations, why we think that's the best decision. And I think that, is appropriate as a public discussion. So, the select board can choose differently, and I can't comment on the legal thing, but as a general idea, I think it is better as a public discussion.
Okay. At this point, I don't know what sort of moving forward, if there's any other action that the board would like to take. We did, submit that request to have open discussion, and we've heard some about the process so far. So I'm not sure if any of the board members feel like there is any further action that you would like for me or, for us to take on, for me to take on your behalf at this point.
If we could just get written confirmation from town council that they approve this RFP, I'm prepared to put this issue to bed.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been trying to get that. Sorry, I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, we did ask for that. It's summer and maybe
I've
just
asked for it
taking a little
couple of
longer.
times, too. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Sorry, I
So
didn't have that for you today. I meant to.
So I'm not prepared to put it to bed because I think there are elements of this discussion that should be discussed in open meeting. Certainly those things that get specific enough to where, to where, a justification could be made that, there would be a detrimental effect to having it in open meeting law is one thing. But I'm not at all reassured yet that a fuller assessment of the building's disposition, which might include, taking it, of disposing it through sale and getting the money from that sale and putting it back on the tax rolls, and therefore being able to compare the sale option with the lease option, that both of those are being fully researched. Now, if in the end, Greg, you're sitting there saying, we're moving forward with a range of options, whatever that fuller range of options that we feel are out there, and we are researching both. And then when we come to open meeting to discuss the results of that research, we will have not only a lease, but we will have the other options laid out to show that the lease is the best. And I'm not speaking that the determination to decide to lease has to be only on financial terms. It can be on other terms. But again, setting the art space aside and speaking more hypothetically,
Right.
if you had a lease that was going to result in significantly less income revenue to the town,
Right.
than a lease would, then you would want to be able to justify why you were making that decision, because we feel as though this does this for the town. And
You're right.
therefore,
So-
and that's what I'm saying is, so if at the end of the process, in open meeting, there's going to be a negotiated lease and that's it, then I'm still not reassured.
So
If on the other hand, you're sitting there saying, we're going to put forward a fuller set of options and explain why we feel that the option that the select board is going to approve is the best one, then I'm fine with that.
So that even procurement guide, actually it might be a part of the procurement law, does require that sort of like explanation be submitted through the Secretary of State's central registry. And I've already drafted it. It's ready to go, because it is a reflection of the sort of will of the select board and the sort of guidance that they gave. But to your point, I mean, it's, in other words, like, it is understood that there's a decision that was made to do the route that was taken, and what is the opportunity cost, so to speak, of that decision. And that's something.
But the purpose of open meeting law is not only for the select board to be able to articulate its will. It is also for members of the community, whether there is a huge wave of them or even just one,
Sure.
to be able to come forward and register their perspective on that.
Sure.
And what you're going to say is, at the end of this process, the board will lay out its case and take input on this important decision, then and take that into consideration before voting, then I am reassured. And if not, then I'm not reassured.
Can I just clarify that I'm fully aligned with Ken? When I said put to bed, I was just referring to my concerns regarding the RFP issues, not the concerns that Ken raised.
Okay. Justine, did you?
Yeah, I was gonna say something, but I'm just gonna reserve it for later. It's all set. Thanks.
Okay. So I would say then that what the concerns that we have heard tonight, hopefully the outcome would be that when the lease, because they're going through the lease process now in executive session, we know that. So that process has begun. When that process is finished, but not yet not yet moved forward to being done, that at that point, things will go to a public meeting where town meeting voters can see the options, see the lease, see what, maybe some of the things that led to that discussion. And I think what Ken would be looking for too is the other, not just the lease and the, and I guess a justification for it, but a chance to have discussion at that point before we sign this lease. Can we talk about just the greater, bigger picture and make sure that the lease is the right option to go with? So is there, yep, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just say for my part, specifically to your question, I don't have another action for FinCom to take at this point. I think we've
Okay.
raised our concerns and so be it.
And I would agree.
Just as a reminder, I would want an email sent to town council just to confirm that they did indeed
Yep.
approve the RFP.
Yeah. We have
then-
that request out, and I will, as soon as we get it back, I will, or whatever her response be, whatever we
Yep.
get back, I will send it to you.
Thank you.
All right, is there, I know we have quite a few guests with us this evening. Thank you for joining, and we're not done yet with our meeting, but I do believe a bunch of you are here for this first discussion. So at this point, since we have had our discussion on this, if there's anything pressing or anything that you would like, any members of the public would like to input now, I will open the floor to you. Okay. Oh,
Hi.
Lisa?
Hi, yeah, thank you. So will it move to the lease negotiation process to the public meeting to then discussion? Is that what's going to happen?
I believe that is up to the select board to decide that they will have a fuller discussion in public prior. I mean, they have to put the lease in, Greg, correct me if I'm wrong. They have to put the lease into public view before it is signed, sealed, delivered, done. It has to be looked at by members of the public. Whether or not they have a fuller discussion in a public meeting concerning all of the other options, those costs, et cetera, I could not say.
That's correct.
Okay. And what kind of timeline does that look like?
Oh, that's a very good question.
I'm trying to get it on as soon as possible. There's a select board meeting next week that I would love to get on the agenda. It's already kind of a full agenda, but this is obviously very important. So I was on vacation the week before last week, whenever, I don't know, the days are blurry.
Days are blurry.
And that set me back a little bit, but they've been cooperative. Art Space has been cooperative. Town Council is working with me. So I would love to get it on there by next week.
And when you say get it on there, is that for the select board to approve the lease?
Yes, because
the final lease version.
Yeah, because that's well, maybe. So of course the chair decides what the final agenda says. And so he, in this case, Jeff Swanberg, may not want it up for vote yet, but and some chairs do want it, or some chairs want it delayed, I don't know, but Art Space itself has been really advocating to get it done. Like they would have loved it months ago. So we're trying to keep up.
Although the lease, just to remind everyone, the lease is not up until December 31st, correct?
That's right.
It's a year-end, calendar year-end lease.
That's right.
Okay. So all of the new, should it move forward with a new lease, does not begin until January.
Yep.
Okay.
And so a rough estimate of timing, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 22 months.
So let's say the board sees it next week. Let's say it's just a draft of the lease agreement. The board, which they don't even have to, they could see that in executive session. And then let's say it's another 2 weeks, because I think the next meeting is September 26th. I'm trying to remember when the next select board meeting is. I don't recall. But then, so it could be I'm going to say 4 to 6 weeks for the, just to get the lease approved. But as Alana just said, that's for a term to start January 1st.
Right,
Okay.
right. And that doesn't include the public meeting and such.
It does. My timeline is based on those public meetings,
I got you. Okay.
which is the select board meeting that happens regular sessions twice a month.
Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. Well, we've gone a little over time on this, so I think I'm going to move on. But thank you all for that good discussion. Our next agenda item is budget discussion. So Greg, and for those looking at board docs, there is the budget revision 12/8/4/22. I don't know if that's still relatively the one right now, or
No, I
okay.
think that's right. If that's
Okay.
what was at the budget subcommittee, then there's hasn't been any significant changes. But I can speak to like what that all means.
Yeah, we, just we're prepping for special town meeting.
Yep.
I assume we're gonna have a budget article.
That's right.
There's gonna be changes. So can you give us the highlights?
That's right.
Hopefully not a lot of lowlights.
That's okay.
But go ahead.
So one of those documents is referring to revenue, which is where we often start all our budgets, right? There was kind of like two major ways that we had adjustments to revenue over the course of the summer. One was the state budget. So we went to town meeting in June without, was that June or was that May? I don't know.
May.
Thank
Town
you.
meetings in May.
Yeah, I know, but we delayed. I don't know. All right, so May.
Oh, right. Oh, sorry.
Doesn't matter. So we went. So
Yes.
in the town meeting, we went without knowing what the final state budget was going to be, and we were conservative on our estimates from like back in January what the state budget was going to yield. But you can see where it says the column FY23 conference committee. So this is the budget, but so this incorporates the revenue. There was another sheet that just says revenue. So, but I'm just going to hit but I'm just going to hit the wave tops, which is so the state did end up giving more money to localities, and we got it in mainly two ways. One was Chapter 70, which is school aid, which is offset by some assessments. So when you have, some kids going out of district, you get assessed for those costs. But then, but anyways, we still ended up in the black. The other way the town got money is through UGA, which is Unrestricted Government Aid. And you can see that here on this spreadsheet where it says general government. So how it says 83,938 in the second to the right column. So we got some more money out of that. And then another way that we will be considering adjustments to the FY23 budget, which is the budget right now, which was appropriated at town meeting, is through local receipts. So we, Lori Plord, who's on the call, she's the town accountant. We looked at the local receipts that we had collected up through, the change of the fiscal year. We're finalizing our interview reporting right now, but we have enough of the data to know like kind of where we ended up in a lot of our local receipts. By local receipts, I'm referring to everything from like dog licenses to marijuana to excise taxes.
Yep.
And there was a couple that went down that like we you should adjust either way if need be. But a lot of them went up, so we were able to sort of realize capturing new revenue in local receipts, which is good. And that's the advised way to budget, which is conservative, right? You don't want to overspend what you don't know, but we were able to sort of identify areas where we can make adjustments. Those adjustments will also then be translated going into FY24, because if we feel a certain confidence in collecting those revenues, then the expectation is that pattern will continue. But again, we're not on FY24, right? We're talking about FY23. So, right. So for FY23, we took those, and then you can apply it to where you are. However, as much as all that is very good, and I think the end result was about $215,000 in the black for which is the combination of state budget and local receipt. Yeah, 215.
Yep.
That sounds great. However, I have a number of contractual obligations that I have to meet. So we negotiated three union contracts, and we're still negotiating one right now, which is the firefighters. We're not done yet. Plus a number of personnel contracts. So that eats up a lot of those adjustments, which I didn't know. Like I had a like sort of placeholder number in the FY23 budget, but I didn't know where all those were going to end up. Also, I had a number of retirements. And so as the Finance Committee is very familiar with, whenever I have a retirement for people that have been grandfathered in certain policies, it's a big buyout that we have to, payouts that we do. And then, but another huge cost is the trash contract. So
Yeah.
Harvey is our collecting services. They do trash and recycling. And then we have a different service that does, it's called it's not called Wheelabrator anymore, but they're the incinerator where we take all our trash to. But Harvey does all the collection, and their contract expired, and over the course of many months, and Harvey got bought by national companies that really delayed, that kind of sort of like complicated the negotiations. It just took that much longer to get responses back. But we finally got back an agreement, which will be going to the select board next week. And that's a cost of another $150,000 for 1 year of services. So that'll get us through this FY23. And that's a lot. And I know that is a lot. But that, as surprising as that may be, it's not so unheard of, because it's these trash, we've talked about this in different public meetings and whatnot. Trash companies have a really tight hold over municipalities, and there's not a lot of competition. In fact, this is not official, but it's the sort of like understanding is that they just don't compete with each other. So anyways, $150,000 plus all those personnel contracts. Plus I need to pay our solar consultant because we're still trying to get solar panels and I still got to pay her. So we got costs. Now, fortunately, we had set aside, both through the operating budget and through free cash, the combination of both $100,000 towards personnel contracts, which is good, and that takes care of a lot of my anxiety when it comes to these personnel contracts, but not all of it, right? And then especially with that trash contract, that eats up a big chunk. So I've told the superintendent's office, and I told the budget subcommittee for the school department not to expect money out of that 215 down there, which was received. So but that's just how these things go. So for the FY23 budget amendment, which I'm finalizing now, with Lori, which I hope to get to, I'll give it to the Finance Committee as soon as possible. But that's the headlines, is that it's going to be new revenue, which will pay for contractual obligations.
Okay. Any questions on the FY23 revision of the budget that will be moving forward for special town meeting?
I got some questions.
Okay.
So the sanitation contract, is that still under negotiation right now?
Well, there's a tentative agreement, but it has to be ratified in public next week.
Okay. So is it still covered by executive session, or can we discuss that?
I don't think I brought it to the select board for executive session.
Okay. All right.
So it'll be discussed. It'll be discussed at the select board meeting.
Yeah, I am according to the charter, I'm the agent of the select board, so I negotiate on their behalf.
Okay. So I imagine there was probably an RFP for sanitation, correct?
No, we're not required. So trash collection is an exemption to Chapter 33 procurement law.
So you pretty much engaged in a sole source negotiation.
Yeah, you might even think of it as a renewal.
A renewal. And no other competitors were even considered?
Oh, they were considered. But as I said, they wouldn't compete. So the town also has the option of not having a trash contract, or households, and there's a number of households that do this. You don't have to go through Harvey, so you can get your own contract. But we also don't have a transfer station, so that obviously that greatly limits residents.
But we also subsidize Harvey, correct?
So right,
The
so we pay.
stickers. You're
That's right.
referring
So
to
we
the
have-
stickers, yes.
So we have the stickers and the general fund. That's what pays for it.
Yep.
But I guess net the stickers, so there's some sticker contribution, but there's also funds that are being drawn off the general fund.
And that's what I was referring
Yes.
to, that
Yeah,
to that
yeah.
$150,000.
Yep.
All right. So did you reach out to competitors and just you got the cold shoulder? I mean, what's the story with the competition here? Is it like, are they really like colluding just to have like local monopolies?
I mean, I couldn't say so far as I went to that. I'd have to defer to Justin DeMarco, who's already published a memo, and he'll be presenting next week. I really don't. I know we did not do a bid process.
Okay. So you did do a bid process, and of course, without any competition, they're now trying to raise their price on us.
Yeah, absolutely. This is not rare. Like it is actually rare to go out to bid for new trash. I did it once in Westford because the existing family-owned company went out of business, so we didn't have a choice.
Well, I guess the existing companies just got bought out by this giant national
That's right.
corporation.
That's right.
And it sounds like they're kind of putting the screws on us.
As I would be surprised if a town had unless we were maybe closer to the city and there was actual like proximity to, the competition is just not there. That's not my understanding.
But yet people are contracting with other collectors, as you know. Have we
Some
considered engaging with those collectors that those other people are contracting with?
Absolutely, but that doesn't mean that the company can handle the scale.
Yeah, some of those companies are more about individual homes than they are whole towns.
Right. Or that particular individual household has whatever demands that they want a different sort of pickup procedure. Whatever it could be.
But it does sound like there are competitors. They may not have the scale for us to subsidize, but it does sound like there are competitors in town that we are, I guess, not engaging with or engaging with, and you just found that they weren't up to the requirements. I mean, what's the story behind this competition here?
I think it's the latter, as you described. So we don't get phone calls from Republic. We don't get phone calls from Waste Management. We don't get phone calls from, actually, Trash Man was bought by Harvey, who was then bought by a national brand. So there's not. I'm not thrilled about the idea that I can't. You just grilled me on whether I went out to bid for somebody that I was pretty sure I was only gonna get one bidder for. I mean, like I would prefer competition.
As would I, but I mean, just for context, people are hurting. I mean, we're in a bind here. As a town, we either are going to have to raise taxes or we're going to have to cut services.
But unfortunately, Kevin, we are a small town, and so it's not uncommon for us to get only a single bidder. I think the school system had something similar to that with the bus contract, where you have lots of bus companies out there, but only one bids.
We're small potatoes and we're
not
not worth
uncommon.
changing. Yeah,
But-
we're not worth a new route over sometimes.
I mean, what I'm wondering is if it's less of an issue for private individuals to find the competition than it is for us for a town, maybe we should consider privatizing the sanitation service as a means of efficiency. Because as I said, we're in a bind. We are hurting for funds.
You mean
Yeah.
individual household contracts? Is that
He
what you-
means taking, like, Maynard does no longer provide you with trash service. You have to figure it out yourself.
like we do in it. Like I'm coming to you from West Acton, right? And that's what we got.
Yeah,
So-
I mean, it is an option. Sudbury, a lot of the towns do it. They don't have town-wide trash collection. It certainly is an option, whether it's one that, people want to go with when we're concerned about what would happen to our rail trail, if that were the case. You know, people protest enough about the cost of the stickers. I don't know, but I hear you. It's an option. Yes, it absolutely is an option, Kevin.
I mean, if I was one of those purchasers of those other services, I'd be pretty ticked off if I found out, I'd be pretty ticked off if the town was subsidizing someone who I'm not even using.
But that would be your choice.
That's your
Like,
choice to go to a private.
Yeah,
You know,
but
so-
still my tax dollars are going to a service that, that I'm not using. It's a little bit inefficient.
Well,
I
my
think.
tax dollars go to the schools and
Well,
my kids
yeah.
don't go to the schools, but that's okay, because that's the way it works. We live in a society. I'm
But
I'm cool with it. It was my choice to withdraw them.
But I
like-
think that's a determination the voters have to make is, do I want to be locked in with this subsidy somewhat? Do I want to be locked in to a sole source provider? Or do I want to just go out on my own and try to find some competition? Because right now it seems like the town is unable to find the competition, but private individuals are. So it may makes more sense to lower our cost and to lower to increase the efficiency of the services delivered per tax dollars collected to go private.
That's true, but it might be you'd have to be careful of the cost of the individual household who would, I'm not probably
Right.
going to be lowering taxes. It's all the likelihood we would be, instead of paying $150,000 towards Harvey, I'd be paying $150,000 towards a new teacher, a new, I don't know, like there's 1,000 things that we get requests for all the time. So it's unlikely that would just be going back to the tax dollars. I'd also want to give a little context that the select board had accepted the town administrator's recommendation to form I can't remember what we called it, a trash recycling collection advisory group,
Yeah,
to task force advisory
Yeah.
group to really look at those and ask those questions. Like what might be the best path forward for the community? I wanted to accomplish getting this contract because I needed that trash picked up for the rest of this year.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. I think
Right.
we can't drop on people, we can't tell people like 1 month in advance, like, hey, your trash
Right.
service is
No.
stopping.
absolutely.
I don't want to drop that on people, but I think for the long term, we have to get the ball rolling on
Yeah.
alternatives
absolutely.
and really only lock ourselves into Harvey for 1 year. I think 1 year's notice is sufficient to give.
Yeah,
to
the
people.
proposed contract for the select board to consider is a 1-year contract with the options to extend for 2 years. Like one individual, so it could go 2 more years after that. But we'll be shifting in that direction shortly.
Jillian, go ahead. You have your hand up.
Can you hear me? Did I unmute
Yep.
myself?
Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to say, I think that we might be hard pressed to find, for example, I throw out like one $4 trash bag a week. I think you would be very hard pressed to find a trash service for someone that would do that same thing. Like if I went and got an individual service. So, I think there's a lot of older people in the town, that maybe throw like 1 or 2 trash bags away a week. And that could potentially be a large burden for them because they don't have like a large volume of trash. So that's, something to consider. And it's also something to consider if we don't do it. And if there's individuals who don't throw their trash out properly, are we going to have to pay money up to clean up the town? And the town will also have to, pick up their own garbage somehow. So they'll have to get
Right.
a town contract individually
Right.
for all the town buildings and the schools. So it might be worth, thinking about if we would save money in the long run or not. Because, the schools are going to still have to throw out trash. Like
Right.
there are certain buildings in the town that will still have to have some kind of a larger contract for.
Good points. Okay. Were there any other questions on the FY23 budget as it is now?
Just a question, would the bleachers fall under the current agenda item, or is that a separate topic?
I could refer to that, Madam Chair, if you because it might have, because I probably need to pay for it from FY23.
Okay, sure.
So let me just sort of like address the bleachers. So
Sure.
the town's building inspector did a periodic inspection. Actually, it's kind of a re-inspection of the bleachers, which are old. off the top of my head, I can't remember how old the bleachers are, right? Not great. And they were grandfathered to be semi-acceptable when it came to a lot of like modern building codes and architectural review, etc. But they're not really, if it wasn't for being grandfathered, like we wouldn't be buying those sort of bleachers nowadays. So anyways, the building inspector went back out and said, look, it needs to be addressed further. Like 3 or 4 years ago, we put additional backings between the seats so that, because it was just too big of a gap. But the building inspector found that like there needs to be more done. It needs to be more substantially done. Now the town meeting did appropriate $174,000 worth of free cash towards the design and engineering but that was intended for new bleachers. But because the building inspector just said that he can't certify the bleachers right now, and by the way, there's 2 sets, so there's one on the home side and there's one on the visiting side. He says that no matter what you do to the visiting side, he cannot in good conscience certify the visiting side. But he did say, and there's a list of repairs that could be made to the home side, that he then could certify that. So I have an engineering firm come out tomorrow that's going to take a look at it and just tell me if they can give me a scope of work so I can quote that work. I don't know how many weeks it's going to take, but I'm going to have to pay for that.
Right.
And that's your question, I think, is how to pay for that. So I can either, one, I'll come back to the finance committee and beg for reserve fund. 2, I can see if town meeting can reappropriate some of that $174,000 towards whatever the cost for those repairs may be. Or 3, I can see if there's any money left from this FY23 budget amendments that I'm trying to make to see if I don't even know how much it costs. So it's kind of a tough exercise because I don't have the quotes in hand to know how much money I need to budget for.
So I have a question. Why is the catastrophic failure of the bleachers such a surprise to this town? I mean, yeah, so why was this such a surprise that we weren't able to use the bleachers this year?
I think if you've been following along, it's not a surprise.
Yeah.
I think
Not a
unfortunately it went a little too far. We let it go too long. We had some plans in place to start getting, the new ones designed so that we could fund them. I think there may now be some plans to possibly put the funding wrapped into Green Meadows.
That's like
Ask,
a loose plan. I will maybe
We'll have to figure out how to fund it. It's not going to be cheap.
Yeah. The new bleachers, not
New
the repairs
bleachers
to
will
the
not be
current.
cheap.
I mean,
Yeah. So it
but
got
just
the
more
can
to the
got kicked
point.
a little, but
We've been talking about this for 5 years.
Yeah.
It's not new. There's nothing surprised about this.
right. It is, I think everybody went, oh, school's about to start, and our building inspector said we can't use the bleachers, and it's like, so now it's suddenly a real problem because school is but I don't think it's a surprise that I think it just, we didn't get it done in time before it was too catastrophic.
I was hoping not to spend any more money on the existing bleachers. I
sympathize with that, but I'm just looking at this and I think it's collective responsibility here. Like not a single board, it's town meeting, it's FinCom, it's select board. We all dropped the ball on this. We're wasting, this $174,000 we're going to have to reappropriate for the survey. This is $174 we're essentially wasting because of a lack of planning or a lack of intelligence as to and I use that in like the military sense, not on the brain sense, but a lack of knowledge of what the lifetime of this infrastructure is, and really like what is the safe limit that we can ride this out before we're looking at a catastrophic failure. I think we really, I emphasize again, people are hurting. We are either going to have to raise taxes or cut services, and this $174,000 hurts. This is $174,000 that we wasted because we tried to ride out failing infrastructure for too long. I think we have to get better at assessing our infrastructure and being able to determine what's the safe limit that we can ride this out on.
That's true.
Yes,
and we have I think that having the capital planning committee up and really doing great work is going to be helpful in that. And that wasn't something that was happening for a while. And yeah, it is frustrating to put Band-Aids on when we don't want to pay for Band-Aids. It was frustrating to have to pay for new HVAC in the fire station that
Yeah.
we're tearing down. It is frustrating, 100%. Peter, let me get Jillian, who's got her hand up, and then I'll come back to you.
Yeah, sorry, good.
Go ahead, Jillian.
I was just going to say, you know, I feel like the tone is a little bit intense tonight, but you know, I think the bleachers are something that we've known about for a while. We just don't have the $1 to $2 million right now to address them. So I mean, I don't think it's a surprise, and you know, people have been trying to come up with ways that it can be paid for. But like you said, at the end of the day, it's a matter of services and how much money we have. So, I don't know. Are the bleachers something that are required to be present on the field? Is that something we could just rip down and not have? Like, is there a requirement to repair them?
That's a good question. I don't think it's required in order for the athletes to have their games.
Yeah, probably not. But the
But-
superintendent's office is looking into temporary bleachers. I think there's going to be. I think people are going to want bleachers. That's my.
Well, sure. That's
Yeah. Yeah.
We there's a lot of people want a lot of things.
Yeah.
I
yeah,
agree. But right. I mean, it is certainly something to take into account, you know, except that unfortunately I don't think we're quite on ahead in the game enough to know when we would have the new ones ready. So it'd be one thing to say, we got to tear down these bleachers. We're really sorry. You're not going to have bleachers for football season, but that's not what we would say. We would tear them down and be like, we'll get you new bleachers sometime. Like, so that's a little bit harder of a thing to say.
Yeah.
Can we like rent bleachers? Like,
well, that's what Greg
travel
was just
bleachers?
saying, that the superintendent is
Right?
looking into,
Rentals?
yeah, he's looking into temporary ones, I guess.
I think
So,
that's what he's going to try.
and Greg, can you just clarify for everyone, because I think it gets confusing, anyone watching the recording later. This is one of those areas where school budget and town budget kind of,
Yeah.
you know, get confusing. So
Yeah. So that's a good point. So a couple of years ago, there was a memorandum of agreement between the school committee and the select board. So that basically, you know, the district and then the capital T town to about whose responsibilities it was going to be for facilities maintenance. And that also, of course, includes the athletic fields. So the town, capital T town, the Department of Public Works are responsible for the maintenance of the athletic facilities, which includes the fields, right? So it's public works guys that mow those fields and do the line painting and all that stuff. And then it's the school and mostly the custodians that are responsible for, think of like the buildings, the schools themselves, and like the envelope and everything inside. Right. So the bleachers fall to the town when it comes to like maintaining all that. But being that the schools are responsible for the operations, like, so they use the fields and we fix them. So that's why I think it is appropriate for the superintendent to go to his athletic director and go to the coaches and say, what do you guys need in the fields? Because that drives, that intelligence drives the operations of the facilities maintenance.
okay, but this is something that is not, this was not expected of the school budget to cover. I just want to.
That's not my expectation. I mean,
Right,
like,
okay.
I'll have
I just want to make that clear.
That's true. I'll have a conversation. My expectation was to find it in the budget, right? So that's what I was going to do.
Okay. Peter, did you have something else to say on this?
No, Jillian made my point better than I would have, so.
Okay. All right, so can we move on in our budget discussion for preliminary FY24? And also we can just talk about anything else that the budget subcommittee had for those that are members. So I don't.
Do you want to bring up, do you
Yeah,
have
I do. Hold on. Give me 1 second.
while she does that, I'll give the same speech I gave to the budget subcommittee, that this is like super preliminary,
Yeah,
like big asterisk, like straw man I wrote at the top, which is a
right.
term that
I
means, like,
liked that.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like straw man. Okay.
Like this is like Lori did a great job of looking at the numbers and then she and I sort of sat down and just assigned stuff. Like
Okay.
don't read into it too much. So, and then first of all, I also need to point out that, like, even with the column there where it says FY23 town administrator as of June, that's going to change, because
That's
if I
right.
make adjustments based on both revenue and then expenses, it's going to change.
Mhm.
But what she did do is she plugged in, Lori did, she plugged in revenue that we knew of, so like from the governor's budget, etc. And then, so, you know, start out like any budget, you look at what your revenue is going to be, and being in Maynard, it's, you know, tax money predominantly. So we were able to do that. One thing to note is you can see it's only $250,000 estimate for new growth. I usually start bugging my chief assessor September, October, November. My chief assessor is retiring in about sooner than I would want. So we went kind of uber conservative when it came to our new growth, but I'm hoping that could be adjusted. But, you know, new growth, this was expected. Like, we knew new growth, it wasn't going to be, you know, like, I'm $250,000, $300,000 could be like that stable amount of new growth I think the town could expect, but it would be hard to justify anything more than that. And then even the debt exclusions might change. You know, like, let's say we go out to, you know, the expectation is that there's going to be a debt exclusion vote for the elementary school in the summertime.
Yeah, that was going to be my question. Why is that not?
Because I don't know that yet.
We have no idea how much yet.
Yeah, I'm not trying to, like, this is,
Okay.
remember the straw
Yeah,
man.
yeah. Sorry.
Okay. And then anyway, so that we just plugged in some estimates when it came to all the revenue. And then if you want to scroll down. Oh, can you go up a little bit?
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Right, so you can see some of the notes on the side there when it comes to transfers, you know, like water, sewer, ambulance, PEG. Oh, that's something I need to talk about. So PEG, we have two contracts. We have Comcast and Verizon.
Mhm.
Comcast is a 10-year deal. Verizon is only a 5-year deal, and that 5 years is expiring. So if we get about 180 per provider, and I don't know what Verizon is going to look like. So we need to sort of be prepared for the worst case scenario. I don't know if Verizon is just going to pull out completely out of Maynard. But anyways, that's being negotiated right now. So, but that
Do they have to, if they don't pull out, do they have to still give us
yes,
the
because
PEG money?
Yeah, because
Like-
they're using public utilities to get to your household.
Okay.
So we own the right of way, and they put up telephone poles on that right of way, and so they're yeah.
Okay.
It's like, I think it's actually a lot of it's controlled at the federal level.
So it's sort of an all or none. It's not like we could.
No,
we would,
there's probably going to be a middle. So I don't
Okay.
know how they're gonna calculate, or, you know, like, whatever the formula is for how much they're going to give Maynard, right? So it's probably
Okay.
going to be, I would guess there's going to be some sort of like the data of how many households are using Verizon, like how many contracts do they have, and then however they determine the formula, that's then negotiated into how much money per household, as well as some capital. So we get money through PEG. PEG is public education government. It's an acronym, but it's basically the program, the policy that is Comcast, Verizon, whoever pays municipalities. And so we get some money from capital, we get some money out of just regular payments. But a lot of that money is best thought of going to pay for WAVM.
right.
So it's not a 1-for-1, because we could track that, as you can see down there under expenses. It's just PEG access, right? So that just goes to our bottom line general fund. But you can think of it as sort of earmarked to go towards WAVM.
Yep.
But I've been saying this for years. My expectation is that, like, we're not going to, like, not pay for WAVM. So whether that money comes from PEG or it comes from general fund, we'll have to figure that out. So then going into expenses, we just assigned percentage points. So this could go up or down, as you guys know, every function, which is, so general government includes many departments, right? And those departments could come up or down. And then same with public safety, education, Maynard. So it's at 3%, and we were just short of 3% at the what was appropriated town meeting. So again, this is all sort of unknowns. Asset bet, same thing. Could be 3%, could be higher. What else to point out? Culture and recreation, that's a library, folks. So don't, that's what it is. So it's just the library. And then here's just kind of a random note. We might have some debt service, non-exempt debt service that could be used elsewise, otherwise. So it's about $50,000. And as you can see in my note, I wrote, we may reduce that unless I know that we need to make renovations to the golf course, the envelope, the roof, the HVAC, and the windows, they all need to be redone. So maybe we need to put money into that. And if we take a loan out, if we borrow for that, then that's that $50,000 is going to pay for that premium. Or bleachers, right? So if we decide to take out money for the bleachers, which was alluded to earlier, one way to pay for, I have no idea how much bleachers cost, but let's say we get good bleachers and it costs $2 million. So one way you can pay for that, and this is not determined, I'm just saying one way you can pay for that is if you add that to what you're already going to be borrowing. So if we're already going to be asking for borrowing authorization from town meeting for the elementary school, you tack on a couple $1 million. That way it's just packaged. You can do 2 different votes. You can do 1 vote, but it's packaged when we go out to bond. But we have to pay for that. You have to pay for the debt. And then employee benefits. So our claims were high, but that's not anyone's fault in particular. Like claims come up and down. And we have health insurance through Maya, which is actually Blue Cross Blue Shield is the provider, and then we subscribe to Maya, and then and we've had a couple of really good years when it came to our renewals for our premiums, but our consultants are telling us that may not be the case. So we did 7%. I hope it's not any higher than 7%. This is always the case. The story is, we put a number there, and then, or as the months go by, Maya, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and my consultant will kind of say, hey, maybe it's not going to be so high, maybe come down 0.5 percentage point. And then eventually I won't find out the real number until February. Reserve funds the same, PEG access, I talked about that. So that number is going to change. It's 366 right now, but if we don't keep Verizon, then we have to adjust that.
Right.
So you can see right now, the net is in parentheses. So it's in the red, 278, which sounds like it's not as high as it, but it's probably going to go up because it always does. And then we figure out how to get it back to a balanced budget. But that's the story so far.
So Greg, the new elementary school, assuming that goes through and we have that's going to go into capital debt service exempt. Is that right?
That's likely. Yeah.
So that 2,600,000 is not including anything having to do with the elementary school.
I don't believe so. Lori, can you verify that? That doesn't include any new debt.
No, it doesn't.
Right. So that more than likely, is going to go up.
Yeah.
By a significant. I mean, we're not talking about a $1 million debt. We're talking about a $40 million debt or whatever it's. I don't know but it's a lot.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. And so that,
but
what goes in that number is actually a factor of the cost to borrow.
No,
So-
I know that. No, I'm not saying 40 million is going into that line. Sorry, I didn't mean to insinuate that.
Okay.
But it's a significant increase to that line because it's a significant borrowing.
Yeah, but even the debt schedule might adjust. So like we might only borrow for a portion of it. Like I don't know how it all plays out, especially when it comes to working with MSBA.
Right,
So-
right. Yes,
So
thank you.
we didn't do the fire station, and we didn't borrow for the first. I can't remember how we broke it down for the fire station, but we didn't end up having to do the full gambit.
You don't put a full, right, whatever
Yeah.
the cost is, it doesn't, all of that debt doesn't the payments for that debt doesn't go on like year one.
But even for the fire station, we only had to pay. I think we only had to pay. I don't remember if we had to pay the premium the first year or not, but we ended
Okay.
up kind of breaking it up. Like I think we paid the interest the first, and then we paid the premium and the interest the next year.
Okay.
Yep.
Sorry, Peter, did you have something?
I just was going to note if we end up adding debt for the Green Meadow, we also will add income because it'll be a debt exemption,
That's right.
presumably.
That's right.
So it won't
Okay.
it won't create more of a deficit,
No.
is what I'm saying.
Oh,
We'd be
okay.
adding both sides.
Thank you. Yep. Yep. I see what you're saying. Thanks, Peter. That was a good clarification.
That's a good point.
So I have a question about how the MSBA is being accounted for, because we're doing the debt exclusion, but the MSBA funds are going into the general fund. Am I understanding that correctly?
Lori, where's that get accounted for?
The way they do it now, I'm not sure how it will be done in the future, but the way it's done now is the general fund receives, so this is our last year of it, 800 and what is it, 90 something thousand. And that offsets the cost of the debt. So the MSBA is paying a portion of our debt payment. That debt payment that we'll be paying off is like $1.1 million for the year. MSBA is contributing over 800,000, and we contribute the rest. So it goes into the general fund to offset, like a revenue source to pay that debt payment.
I mean, it's kind of interesting though how the finances work, because we're kind of the debt we're going to take on is for the full value of the Green Meadow, as opposed to the net from the MSBA funds. Am I understanding that correctly? So
I'm not sure, because sometimes we don't
But-
take on the full debt until we know what the actual final cost is going to be.
Right. It looks like that's the
But-
way it was done prior to me coming here. I'm not exactly sure how we will do this new school and what the process will be. We haven't gotten to that point yet.
I mean, that structure I just described, where you take on the full debt and you capitalize it, but then you also MSBA effectively becomes a revenue stream. I mean,
Yes.
that
Yeah.
could be financially advantageous.
Mhm.
Oh, definitely. Yes.
Depending, yeah.
Well, I think the model for school funding has changed. What's showing up there is the old way they did it with Fowler.
Mhm.
I think the way the high school worked, and I think the way Green Meadow will work, is essentially MSBA pays for their half up front, and it never really affects us.
Oh,
And we
That
for
could
the high
be.
school, we bonded for like half of it or something,
Mhm.
and the MSBA just paid for their half, which is
Ah.
their current model. The Fowler was the old way of doing it,
Mhm.
where they gave us money each year to make the debt payment.
I mean,
Right.
could we
Like,
do
Lori,
the old
maybe
way?
I'm off base and you know better, but as I recall with the high school, that's what we did.
That we never actually had the full bill on our books,
Mhm.
Yeah.
is what you're saying. Yeah. It may be because they didn't like, I don't know, doling it out to general fund and what might potentially happen with that. They want to just pay pay it directly. I don't know.
Mhm.
I mean, we should find out if it's an option, because it's one is very clearly advantageous to the other.
Yeah.
It's essentially
Why?
Yeah, why?
I don't think we have a say.
Yeah,
I don't think it matters.
It's the way they do it, the way they do it.
because it allows you to take out a deeper debt at an interest rate and essentially get effectively cash value for that. But I guess if it's just net of the debt payments, if it's like, I'll have to do the math and see, but it sounds financially like there's probably some net present value calculation involved in this. But it sounds to me like that old way, or what we're calling the old way, may actually be financially advantageous, but I don't even know if it's an option. I'm just
That may have been why they
Yeah.
stopped it, to be honest.
yeah.
Mhm.
All right, any other questions on FY24 preliminary and any other discussion from our budget subcommittee members? Things that came up in the meeting about this or anything?
Um,
Yeah, I don't have anything to add what Greg went through.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm just, so oh, you did put the net value here. So I was curious to see what the growth was in the out of district placement costs, net the government aid, but it seems like you put that information there, so I can go calculate that myself. I guess my other question is the Chapter 70 grant. Is that just ubiquitous? Is it the same sort of grant across all school districts? So is there like a universal grant language, or is there somewhere I could take a look at the language in that grant?
Chapter 70 is calculated a per pupil amount that is given to towns from the state, correct?
Yeah, and it's a complicated formula, but yeah, you can Google it. I wouldn't even begin to guess how they. Yeah,
But basically they figure out how much they're going to give you per pupil, and that's what we get, and that's Chapter 70.
Okay, so there's like a formula, they compute it, and there's like it's just a mathematical formula. There's no like legislative influence over that process.
Oh no, I'm sure there's
yeah, I mean,
well, I mean, is the lever on the formula, or can legislatures like tailor the grant to particular school districts?
No, it's so they redid the formula a couple of years ago to try to. This came up amongst the finance committee. I remember we talked about this a good deal, because when they redid it, there was legislative input about how to redo the formula, and one could say a perspective is that a lot of cities were favored in that reevaluation, the redo of the formula. And so yes, so after
but
that,
it's on a state level, I think, to answer your question, Kevin. It's not on our level.
So once it's done, once the formula is set, and then it's just how much money you plug into it. So the more the legislator decides to put money into the Chapter 70 program, then that gets dispersed according to the formula. So it's that how much more they put into it, which was something we didn't know of, and how the state budget was going to finalize. Same thing with the unrestricted aid. Like we didn't know how much money was going to start, which would then be distributed into the municipalities. Otherwise, legislators will do earmarks. So they'll that's usually how they sort of like give money to their constituencies, is they'll do special projects through earmarks.
Right. And the charter school reimbursement, is that a formula, or is that like discretionary on someone's part?
I'm sure it's all formula.
Okay, it's all formula. Okay, so I could go look it up and research it on my own.
Right, go to DESE. Yes.
Sorry, one thing, Kevin. My understanding is, so the formula to determine the Chapter 70 is complicated, relies on a number of factors besides just population. But I believe one of the factors is growth in the number of students. And I think Maynard, my understanding is Maynard has suffered because of that in the last couple of years, that our Chapter 70 is not going up as much as one might expect, given headlines about how much the state is increasing Chapter 70 aid, and it's not going up because the school system isn't growing.
Okay, well that is good to know, because that has a factor, because that, I mean, just I'm getting a little bit sidetracked, but just to throw an example, that would kind of justify increasing the water supply so we could grow the school system. But again, that's just a side note of why I'm kind of interested in this. The other thing, so it's just a formula. I could go look it up, and I could go do my whole math thing with it and see like what different levers we have to pull to try to increase that.
So there's no levers in the charter school. Charter school is a set amount per pupil. It's offset, as you can see on here, by a charter school reimbursement, and that's a little bit more complicated because we get a certain amount of reimbursement for the initial years that a kid goes to a charter school. It's actually more complicated than that because you have kids leaving the school as well as new kids coming in. But there really aren't. My point there is there aren't any levers other than somehow encouraging people who wouldn't otherwise be going to the charter school to remain in the Maynard schools. The school choice is similar. Again, there's a certain amount that when a kid school choice is into Maynard, we get, and when kid school choice is out of Maynard, then we have to pay.
I have
All
no
right.
further questions. Thank you.
Any other discussion on budgeting in general for this agenda item? Okay, then I will move on to our next agenda item, which is special town meeting articles. Just got a flurry of these in today, so we haven't had a lot of time to really look at them. But our timeline is pretty short. So what I think would be best is if we take just get a quick look at what we have so far, and then start maybe divvying them up for comments, just so we know, just for our planning purposes. We have 2 regularly scheduled meetings to do voting and comments on these. If we need a third, we could squeeze one in after the deadline to get it into the written warrant, but it's still there. We can put it in after, and that would be October 3rd if we have to. But so just so we all are clear, we've got September 12th and September 26th. So there aren't a lot. I think it's doable. And we're still waiting on the budget one. And Greg, in Chief Stour's email, he said, here it is, but it could wait for ATM too. What is are you thinking just throw it on STM since we have it done, or?
Yeah, because it seems
Okay.
like you said, it's kind of a light warrant.
Right, okay, all right.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
according to the list that you gave us,
Mhm.
that you sent us today, forwarded from Greg, there are 5 that are definites on there, plus 2 that are possible. It sounds like one, the fire prevention one, so maybe 6 that
Yeah.
are definite.
Yes.
That sounds right.
And we have all of them except for the general fund budget amendment.
And the enterprise. You don't have the enterprise amendments.
Right, so we have
That's
Marble Farm from CPC, we have bylaw chapter 38. We have
the bylaw chapter 38.
That's free.
the periodic financial reports.
That's the free cash thing.
Yep.
Okay.
And I'm just looking, I maybe didn't get a chance to post the fire one because we just got that. So let's let me see if I can get them all out here in a good way, and we can just go through them real quick. Because I want to know from the committee which ones we want to have a representative come through to speak to us about them, and which ones, we're pretty set on. Now I seem to have lost the one I was just talking about, the fire station one. Hold on, or the fire safety.
Right. It's
I know I have it.
I don't want to misquote it. It's relative to fire suppression and smoke alarms and
Right.
transference of ownership and what you have to do to get it up to code, and yeah. But according to Chief Stours, he had already gotten endorsement from the bylaw committee for it.
Yes, he did say that in the email. Here it is, chapter 40. Okay. So I think I have them all here now. And I just wanted to also just reiterate to the committee and also anyone watching that, we are down an admin right now who normally does a lot of the work for special town meeting collating and all of information giving and timelining and all that stuff. So, we'll get it done, but we're a little, town hall staff is a little tight right now. So can all just try to be a team and work and we'll get this special town meeting done. Okay, so this is the one. Which one did I pull up first?
This-
Okay, treatment plant borrowing request.
No.
So this is from Justin. This
So
is
we-
well 4A.
Yeah, so
borrowing.
we've been trying to establish well 4A, which is what next to well 4, for years. I remember like one of my first summer working for the town, Aaron McCloskey drove me out to the woods and pointed out to a hole in the ground and said, that's gonna be our new well. So
Right.
this is like a step in that direction, but we need the treatment plant. Unfortunately, construction costs have gone out of control. So we've already devoted borrowing to this. I think Justin, it might either be in these sponsor comments or it's in the, Justin also wrote a memo for next week's select board meeting so he can have the
Yep.
contract approved. But we've been borrowing towards this for a while. Oh yeah, he does allude to it down here, as well as the select board has committed American Rescue Plan Act money towards it as well. Because we got to get that water. And then this is I think Justin refers to this as phase 2, which is the establishment of well 4A. And then we're going to shift across the street, so to speak, to Old Marlborough Road. But we need to get 4A up. So first we had to establish the well, and then this is to get the treatment.
And just for clarification, this appropriation is this all go because the water sewer being an enterprise fund, it's a little different. So
Yep.
This isn't on your, for example, your debt exclusions, that sheet that we were just looking at,
Right.
because this is all through the enterprise fund. So this will be paid for through
Utility.
water sewer collections. So
Yeah,
this will be tacked onto our water sewer bills, basically.
right.
Okay,
That's right.
just so everyone understands.
And then so this gets translated into the rates. So
Right.
when
Okay.
When the select board considers the rates in the fall, this is part of that consideration, as well as personnel costs, maybe insurance requirements, reserve funds, etc. It's its own thing. It's like it's the sewer and the enterprise funds, sewer and water enterprise funds are like two small businesses.
Right.
And, yeah.
So given the amount that we're talking about here and the fact that, anything having to do with water and whatnot is a bit complicated, I will recommend that I ask Justin to come in to speak with us about this article before we vote on it. Does that sound? I assume the rest of the committee would agree.
I agree.
Yes, although,
Okay.
can we
Yes, agree.
ask for, it would be helpful to have something in writing, and I don't
Okay.
want to make Justin write some big, huge memo, but a quick summary of what have we already spent? How much is the 5 million? I mean, my thinking is the 5 million is the additional cost to finish it because it's expensive,
Yeah.
Okay,
but I kind of would like
like
to
where
see,
phase
oh,
2
we already spent-
is, right? Like
Yeah.
after this, what are we doing?
Well, he
but also what have we done before this?
Yeah, yeah. mhm.
Justin provides a report to the select board as the water and sewer commissioners. And so he wouldn't have to put together something special. He
Right,
would certainly have this information.
Yep.
I gotta imagine, isn't that right, Greg?
Yeah, and I think he already did it. I'm actually looking at what materials. He's on vacation
Okay.
this week, so he tried to get
Okay.
all in for next week's select board. So I'm going to see what he's already done.
it's
I'm just
probably
saying
in
you.
board
He won't have
docs.
to-
If it's on a select board meeting, I could go grab it.
No, it's on the draft because it's next week. So it's
Oh,
not-
okay, good. All right.
But I'm looking at it, and yes, he does talk about that sort of stuff.
Okay.
So it'll be I'm reluctant to kind of give it away right now because I like the select board to see this stuff first, but
Yep.
I'll,
No, I can,
Yeah,
as soon
so
as
we
it's
can-
posted, I can go grab it and,
Yeah.
and forward it on.
I think, whatever comments the finance committee is going to put together is going to have to put this in the context of the larger set of very logical and much needed infrastructure improvements that he has been recommending.
Mhm.
This is, this is one, this is part of a longer term plan that he's put forward, which
Absolutely.
I think town meeting voters need to hear about. And frankly, in my mind, it's a good news story.
Agreed. Is there a member that would particularly like to take on the comments for this article?
Big
Yeah,
one.
I'm fine doing that.
Okay, great.
But I'm not going to do anything else.
That's fine. There's,
I
it's,
mean-
it's a light load and that's a big one. So
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
That's the biggest one of all of them.
Hey,
Like
the
there's-
budget's,
Yeah,
the
there's so
budget's
many
pretty big.
there's so many factors that go into it. I might help you out, Ken, because I have a lot of, well, I have a lot of reasons
here
why we
is-
should do this.
sorry, here, I did pull up, this is some of the just more detailed information that Justin sent along. So we do all have that as well.
You forwarded this to us?
I certainly hope so. If not, it's, hold on. If not, I know it is on board docs because
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that's where I just grabbed it.
so what
Yes.
this is showing, by the way, is that, as you can see, that number is $4.6 million. That's a lot, and the bids came in a lot higher than what we expected. So that's why Justin has to go out to borrow more. That's what I was referring to earlier. And in next week's select board meeting, they're going to be considering approval of a contract for like $2 million. Because we had to break up the bids because they were cumulatively, they were higher than what we had the money for.
No, the cost, the construction cost and everything has just been
Right.
off the charts. Okay, so another one is the community preservation from the Community Preservation Committee. And this, Kevin, as their
Liaison. I was
as their
about to say.
liaison, would you like to do the comments for
Yeah,
this one?
I think that's probably a natural fit.
Okay, great.
So I can go to their meetings and ask any questions I need to do the comments. But yeah, this is a natural fit.
As we have an active liaison and this is not a large sum of money, do we feel like we would need to ask a member of the CPC to come in for this, or do we think we can?
I mean, I could even give the update of why they're doing this, like,
Sure.
right? Well, we get to that on the agenda, but I mean, we could probably even bag it out at my individual update.
Okay. That's sort of my thought, but unless
Yeah.
anybody has is overly concerned about it.
No,
Okay.
isn't now the time to do the update? Are we talking about town
we're-
meeting articles?
We're still doling out the town meeting articles. I was going to hold off on discussing it until after we doled out all the articles.
No, that's okay. You can, if you have, I wasn't sure if you had an update now or
Oh.
if you needed to go to another meeting to,
I
Have they
mean,
already dis-
it's tentative. I don't know if they have not finalized things yet.
okay,
As you said, it's draft stage. But from what I understand, this was for the Marble Park and Historic Site.
Mhm.
Essentially what had happened is they originally went to town meeting with a certain amount and then they put it out to bid. And as a similar story to other construction projects in town, the bid came way over what town meeting had allocated to them. So they had let the funds expire. It's gone back into the general fund. And so now that we need to reappropriate the money at the amount that the bids came in at.
Do you know the numbers? Was it like 4,000 before or 1,000 before or I thought 5,000 would be the extra money. You're saying the total cost is just 5,000?
So what I determined was that they decided to let some money expire. Go roll through the end of the fiscal year, and then the accounting rules took over, and it just essentially those unexpended funds went back, I think, into the free cash or the general fund.
CPC.
What is it called?
It goes back into the CPC fund. It
Okay,
doesn't
it
go
goes
to the
back-
general fund or free
Yeah.
cash.
Okay, but okay, so it goes, I'm sorry, because you're right, because the CPC, it's locked money.
Mhm.
It's locked money. So it goes back into the CPC. And so, but they can't appropriate now because that appropriation expired. So they have to reappropriate it for the excess of what they have.
So is this just adding the 5,000, or are they actually reappropriating a whole amount of what would now be 106,717?
So
It looks like this is just adding 5,000 onto what was appropriated
Oh, yeah. So it's
previously,
adding
which was
5,000 to 101.
right. Okay.
but then there's this like note with, I mean, maybe we should hold off until I go back to the meeting and get some clarifying questions now that I have the article in front of me.
Yeah.
But it says like with unexpended funds as of June 2024 being returned to the funding source. So it's not clear in this article, like what the amount that they returned
I don't
was.
think they did. I think what happened was we appropriated 101, and then they went to bid and got the full estimates for this project, and they need another 5
Okay,
is what I'm
so
guessing.
maybe we should table this issue until I go back and ask some clarifying questions, because
Yeah, we're not going to vote on
yeah.
anything tonight. We're just, this is our first look.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's
that
fine.
statement clashes with what I heard at the meeting, because there's a big discussion that they at least as of that meeting, as of the last meeting, they thought those funds were just going to be returned back to their funding, and they would have to reappropriate the whole amount.
There were funds. I went through the
Oh, okay.
CPC articles when I was reconciling my year end. Quite a few of the articles that were still outstanding that had remaining funds in them had clauses in them there that should have been returned to the general fund back in 2020, 19.
Yeah.
So I did reach out to the committee and ask for their guidance as to why were these still, why were the articles still out there?
Mhm.
And had there been some sort of town meeting vote or CPC vote to allow that, or should they be going back into their funding source? So they reached back out to me and said, no, they need to go back into their funding source. There was a small remaining balance for Marble Hill Farm that they wanted to use for this big project. But because it said to return it to back to its funding source, I think back in 21, at the end of 21 or something like that.
Okay.
They said, no, you know what? Close all the articles that, what I
Yep.
mean, are required to be closed, and we will reappropriate what we need.
The 5,000. Okay.
So
That
the
makes a lot of
101
sense.
is still available.
That's right. Because that was just given.
Yes.
And usually they give 2, I want to say their general, it's usually 2 fiscal years, I want to
Yeah.
say, to be spent. And you're correct, Lori, because this has been a problem in the past where they put that in an article, like it's going to go back to its original source if you don't spend it. But unless someone, and that someone being you, actually goes and does that, it doesn't happen, because obviously CPC doesn't actually, handle that. So that has been a thing where it's like, yeah, these clauses said they have to go back, but then it actually has to go and get done. So
Getting done now.
yeah.
on a slightly related note, do you need my help, Lori, to kind of clean up these books, and as like FinCom to like go and inspect these books and try to clean them up and get them financially in the right place?
No, like I said, this is the only thing. The CPC had a few articles out there, and I did reach out to the chairman, and he said, nope, to close everything that should legally be closed according to these articles. So that is what I did.
All right.
And they'll just move forward now. Either, I don't know if they're going to change their wording or how they're going to do it. I think it was a discussion for the committee for future appropriate.
So most of it sounds like my recollection, except for this 101,000. I thought they were going to roll over the full amount, but it seems like it's just that 500. Now that I see the text.
Just the 5. Yeah. Mhm.
Sorry, 5,000.
Just a new 5,000. Yep.
Okay.
Right. Okay. Okay, so then we have the chapter 38 bylaw, and this is this is the reporting. We talked about this, I think, at one point. Deleting chapter 38, section 4, and replacing it with the following. Free cash within 1 week. So Lori, have you been in contact with the bylaw about this? This seems like
Yes.
your
Yeah, he came in and we had a conversation about what would be reasonable for getting reports up online, what would be a
Okay.
reasonable time frame. And my our year-end report's not truly finalized until the DOR says so. And they
Okay.
certify free cash, they certify my balance sheet, and then our numbers are finalized. And once I hear back from them, it's easy enough to put those reports up online.
Okay, so this is just basically tweaking the one that we have already done about reporting and making it just a little more clear and what you need to have happen, that the Department of Revenue also has to be involved for timing.
Yeah, well, we've been putting up since the other one, even before it was voted at town meeting, we started putting up the monthly expenditure
Right.
reports on the accountant's page. And now this is just saying when, because it takes a while, year end, you're reconciling, sometimes reallocating expenses, revenues, because sometimes, they just hit the wrong count, whatever.
Right.
You reallocate your, reconciling everything, and then it goes to DOR. So we don't put that report up until everything is said and done, because that is your final report for the year.
Makes sense. Okay, so this is just adding this section 4 and section 5 to the new bylaw that we put in section 1 and 2 on at last town meeting. Okay, sounds good. Do we have any takers for the FinCom comments on this one?
I'll take it, Alana.
All righty. Thank you, Danielle. All right. And what else do we have here? I think it was the fire safety. Okay, so we're amending the current. I'd have to go look at the current, but these are all additions, it says. To our current bylaws. So my thought is that we might want to have either Bill Coleman, who is on the bylaw committee, and I'm sure heard about a bunch about this, although they're more about not so much the content when it's given to them from chief. It'd probably be more helpful to talk to the chief about this if we had any questions. So if we think we should, I can go ahead and ask the chief in about this if we think we need it before voting.
I'd like to know more about it from the chief.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, it's a long.
It's a
lots of
good
sections,
addition.
so, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I'd
All
be
right.
curious too, just, I don't know if you're gonna send him any information in advance, but how this compares to other towns. It seems
Okay.
like a lot of things that are try to get us to where things are with the reality of how buildings are now built, but I'm wondering how other towns are handling it.
Okay, sure. All right. Is anyone, and again, I'm not expecting comments before we have the discussion and whatnot, but is anybody interested in taking on the comments for this one?
I can attempt.
Okay.
So that will be after we have the discussion with.
Yeah, you'll probably need some more context
Yeah. All
to
right.
draft them. All right.
And can,
Yep.
I don't know if you want to give the chief a heads up but
Uh-huh.
I'm curious to clarify, section 11,
Okay.
item E, subsection E, I guess. So my quick read of this is that we are requiring then in most building, assuming the building's done without already being pre-sold, residential sprinklers.
Okay.
Is that really what that means, or?
Right.
And are most buildings really without a buyer at the time of construction? Or I'm just curious how this plays out and what the reality of this is.
Okay.
And I think Danielle's thing is right on point. Wait, does everybody else require residential sprinklers at this point?
And there's a lot of two families in town too, particularly like older ones.
Right.
So I don't know if it's only new construction.
Okay.
I didn't get a chance to read it fully, sorry.
No, that's okay. We, like I said, we just got these today, so we need some time to look them over for sure. But yeah, these are good questions for him to clarify. My guess is that it has to do with, right, if you're going to have a house sitting there empty for an unknown amount of time, they don't want it empty and without, something in there to prevent a fire. But we will have I'll ask the chief in to speak to it.
Yeah, but I think it's a bigger deal than that. It's, are we requiring sprinklers in residential new construction now? And if so, is that a common thing or not?
Right. Mm-hmm. Good questions. I will send him a heads up and I will ask him for our next meeting. All right, so there's the budget one that we don't have yet. 1, 2, 3, 4, the budget one, and there was one other one that we don't have yet. So I think that's all that we have. We've looked at all the ones that we have been given thus far. Okay. Right, it's the enterprise fund contract we're still waiting on. Oh, and
Yeah, and the solid waste contract?
the solid waste contract,
That's not a separate article.
no,
That
that's
was
not an article.
No, that's to be incorporated in the FY23 budget. Justin was just pointing it out that it needs to be included in the FY23 budget.
Oh, okay. So it's just the cost of it is what's in the FY23 budget. Okay.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so there's all the other bylaw ones.
Yeah, the planning board decided
That's
not
fine.
to do zoning bylaws for the fall.
Okay, so we don't have
Oh,
those.
okay. So those are off.
Okay.
Right.
And what about disposition of Summer Street?
That's the old fire station.
Yep.
I was optimistic. I was trying to get to that at this fall town meeting, but it's not going to happen. We might need to, we probably have to think about if we need to make any improvements to the intersection, and nothing's ever fast. I was more optimistic. That's all.
What about? Oh no, I think that was that one. Okay.
Are they moving into the building soon, the new building?
Not soon enough. I hope that they're in there by November 1st, because I do not want to do I don't want to get cold and still be in the old fire station.
Yeah, no.
So I think they should be done, like substantially completed by the end of September. But when we're actually moving in, it will probably be over the course of October. We're getting there. We're getting there.
I'm sure the chief is chomping at the bit.
The firefighters.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
that too. And then the only other one you had said, Greg, as a possible would be reallocation of past free cash appropriation for the design engineering of new bleachers.
Yeah.
Constant fares.
Once I figure out how we're gonna pay for that. Yep.
Okay, so there could be another possible one for
Correct.
that. Okay. All right.
Sorry, can I ask one
Mhm.
question on the fire department for 1
Mhm.
second?
Yep.
Which I know very preliminary and you probably haven't even fine tuned anything, Greg, but is your FY 24 straw man budget include an assistant fire chief? Or you just put a percentage on and there's nothing there yet underneath?
You are
beyond the
correct.
percentage.
There is nothing.
Okay,
It
fine.
is just a number. Yeah. Will you
I
be
think that-
surprised if the fire chief submits a budget request for a deputy fire chief? I don't think you will. So
No, but I would be surprised. Well,
don't get
we
into
got
it yet.
there's
Don't get
discussion.
into it.
I'm looking at
Okay.
that health insurance number and but okay. Okay, so that's what we got for special town meeting prep so far. Look those over. I will send some messages to try to get some of the sponsors to come in that we need to see, and we will see how far we get in our next 2 meetings for that. Moving on. And we just have a little routine agenda left. So Lori and Greg, thank you so much for being here tonight. And if you would like to skedaddle at this point, I think that is fine.
Thanks for your time, Madam Chair, and the rest of the Finance Committee. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for being
you.
here. We
You're
appreciate
welcome.
it.
Good night.
Good night. All right, I am going to pull up the minutes, and we have one correction I know to make on the bottom piece here. We are going to move forward into FY 23. We don't have anything going yet for that, so that would be FY 23 at the moment.
I did have a question about the minutes regarding item 8.
Sure.
So I recall hearing that our liaison was going to reach out with that question. Did I mishear that? I have doubts that I was going to follow up with the school district regarding mold, because I was under the impression I wasn't going to step on anyone's toes and let our liaison handle that.
Okay.
Maybe I heard it wrong, and I'm certainly willing to reach out. Hi, Natasha. Yes, I'll be willing to reach out if that's what this committee wishes me to do. But I thought, I was going to respect
No,
the
I
liaison
thought that
position.
was Ken. Do you remember different? I thought that was you that would have said you would.
Yeah, I think that was me, and
Okay.
I just haven't.
I think that was.
Oh, thank
that's
you.
my
Sorry
re-
about that.
That's my recollection, was I was
Okay.
going to do it. I've been out of town for 2 weeks, and
That's all right. It's that time of year.
Understood.
Thank you, Kevin. I have it changed on the minutes.
Great. And I think I had let me see, let me just check my notes really quick. I think I had another minor correction.
Okay.
Oh, yes. The phrasing of PR and marketing, that kind of makes me nervous. I know.
Sorry, where do you know what number? Just so I.
Oh, it was about the GM getting it out to the public.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I'm just a little nervous in the phrasing of that. I know it's accurate, but people might read this as like we're some sort of corporation selling a product. I think it's more apt to describe that we're, if we were going to recommend going forward, that it would be because it's necessary to stave off a financial calamity. That's just my thought. It's highly semantic and just a phrasing issue, but it makes me a little nervous. That's all.
Okay. I mean,
Perhaps an increase in public awareness.
Should be an increase in public awareness for the project.
Yeah.
Okay. There we go. All right, is there any other comments, corrections on the minutes? If not, I will entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve the minutes of July 25th.
Okay, do I have a second?
I will second.
All right, any
as
further
amended.
discussion?
Was it, Kevin, was that you that seconded?
I did.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, then I'll do a roll call vote. Kevin,
Aye.
Peter,
Yes.
Katie,
Yes.
Jillian,
Yes.
Danielle,
Yes.
Ken,
Yes.
and I am a yes as well. Thank you very much, Katie, for the minutes.
Next time I will do them sooner. I always say that, and I promise.
I know, it's all right. Especially in summer, it's tough.
They're always so much better right away, but
Yeah.
we'll get there.
Moving on to updates from chair and members. I think we've pretty much discussed my topics tonight already, so I think I am good. Do other members have updates that they would like to share?
I of course do.
Okay,
I'll try to keep it short. So I met with the CPC committee.
Okay.
One of the items we discussed was Marble Farm.
Mhm.
We already went over that. The other item we discussed was the golf course.
okay,
And so I don't want to tell people things everyone already knows. So Alana, you sent me those notes on the golf course. Did you distribute those notes to the entire committee?
I sent them to you.
Okay, you sent them to me. Was that on a broad distribution, or should I go over those notes?
No, I just sent them to you because
Okay,
I
just
thought
to-
you might, I
Okay.
thought you might not have them for the meeting.
All right. Okay, so the meeting pretty much aligned with what was in those notes.
okay,
So there's currently a flawed title to the golf course property. It is
Yep.
not compliant it's not fully compliant with the CPC with the designated use of CPC funds.
Yeah.
Specifically, I believe it's the what's it called, like the field house?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's considered a recreational building, and that cannot be used with CPC funds. The CPC is probably going to have to pay for a land survey. I did see some maps at the meeting, so that still is up in the air, but I did see some maps. Interesting thing about the golf course after looking at the maps is that there is actually Maynard town property residing in Acton.
Okay.
Which is kind of, I just thought it was kind of funny. Specifically, I think it was like map 12, parcel 73. It's about an acre, but then,
Oh.
White Pond is Maynard property and is not in Maynard.
yeah, it's just only in, it's like, it struck me as like an only in Maynard thing, but that was like the one thing of note that I saw that kind of deviate, that was in addition to the notes, in addition to like seeing some maps. So a map survey may have already done. And let me see. Oh, Article 97. So this is the big thing.
Okay.
So that we do not have to keep that land as a golf course, nor do we have to keep it as CPC land. We can convert it to another use with state legislators sign off with 2/3 approval vote, which according to Ken's note says it's not difficult to get. But so that is an option that I think we may need to consider. Especially, so I always harp on like, we either going to have to raise taxes or cut services. There's actually a third option, which is new development. And I think we should strongly consider invoking Article 97 to convert that golf course into a new development to hopefully generate new revenue. But that's just my personal thought coming out of that meeting, is that we should strongly, as a town, consider invoking Article 97.
Who would do
So-
that, Ken? Would that be a
So,
select board thing?
yeah, so I attended this because when I heard the discussion, I was very concerned because they had an expert come in to
Mhm.
consult with them some weeks ago.
Yep.
And he had put forward essentially an idea that the way to make this whole was for the town to purchase, using town funds, the clubhouse,
Right.
using using as an estimate current value. Which to me was sort of absurd, because you could imagine, a situation where you were trying to fix something and you could have paid less for the entire property, and over time ended up paying more for just the clubhouse.
Right.
And so, to me, if they're going to fix it, then you fix it using the property values or the proportions from back when it was purchased.
Right.
And so now, by extension, and this is where Kevin, I think, I would tend to agree that we ought to take a look at this. Right now, they are interested in keeping it as an 18-hole golf course. They are uninterested in taking a look at, the larger disposition. And just as, look, I don't want to see the golf course go away. That's not the intent. The intent is that you should study the disposition of property, you looking at all of the various options. And they seem unwilling to do that, even though that's, even though, as Kevin said, that it's on the table. And so I realize it's unpleasant for some to look at, the portion of land, but you can imagine that the parcels that are, that have, frontage on roads and so forth would be pretty valuable as building lots. And you could still maintain a lot of recreational space, which is what that was purchased for. So
Right.
now it's not that I want to see the golf course go away, but nor do I want a minority of people forcing a decision to keep a golf course, which now impacts the community as a whole. I mean, that's the same problem with the art space thing.
Right.
I think we need to take a wider look. And if the people in the town sit there and say, we don't care, we want to keep it as a golf course, then fine. I don't have a
Right.
problem
Which
with
was
that.
the initial decision. I mean, it did come up for a vote on whether or not we were going to
so
purchase it.
It was the initial decision. It was an initial decision that, quite frankly, having been involved in that, having been, having attended many meetings on that decision,
Mhm.
this was not something that the entire town was aware of what the impact was. And nor was this well researched out. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in the problem that Kevin was,
Right.
talking about in the first place.
Right.
And so to me, we ought to go back and sit there and say, okay, we're going to purchase this property. What are we going to purchase it for? And, I had somebody said, well, you can't take property off the golf course, because that would force it to go, you wouldn't be able to have 18 holes, and nobody's going to come play for 18 holes. Well, okay.
I mean,
I'm just saying,
Yeah.
then the people of the town need to sit there and say, it is important enough for us to keep an 18-hole golf course that I'm willing to see a major asset go undeveloped. Because now you're talking about who knows how many building lots that could go back onto the tax roll or could go onto the tax rolls here.
And get in our schools, get kids in our schools.
Get kids in our
Um,
schools and people buying these things.
I do have one additional piece of information and to ask. I believe that when they were researching this topic, they did figure out that the town had paid, not CPC money, but there was some town money that was paid for that when we
Correct.
bought that property.
Correct.
And so the thought was that perhaps that could
Correct.
be said that, well, we've bought this.
The clubhouse.
Right, so that we maybe don't need, because the initial
Correct.
thought was like, now the town has to pay CPC back for
No,
the
no,
price of
that's
the clubhouse.
that
Right.
to me.
So
This is this is very, look, I don't blame anybody for not understanding that. Alana, you were
Yeah.
involved with CPC long enough to know all the arcane rules that go into the
Yeah.
use of our,
right,
and so, and I think Kevin is even starting to grow an appreciation for,
Yeah.
what that is. So I don't blame anybody for not knowing. But
right,
what I'm saying is, we need to sit there and do a no kidding, okay, let's look at what the options are.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's the reason why I attended that meeting, because I was very concerned to find out that they were expecting the town to
Right.
pay back the CPC based on current valuation, even though we had purchased it, from valuation from years ago.
right. So in my mind, there's sort of two issues. One is bringing the property to compliance, let's say, with CPC law, which it currently isn't really. And the other is, do we want to, the future of the property?
But
And we
the-
may
the-
need
the-
to do one before, like, I don't know if we would
You
get
have to
in
do the
trouble, like,
one,
yeah,
you have to do the one knowing where you want to go with the other.
yes.
In
So,
other
yeah, I
words,
see that.
if you make it whole, the manner in which you make it whole or make it correct,
Right,
the manner in which you make it correct will restrict the options that you have. So by picking from among them, among the options, which we don't know how many options there are. But once you pick an option, that will force you along a certain path. And
Okay.
what I'd like to see is us research what the paths are before we start sitting here saying, well, that's what we're going to do.
right.
So I just want to weigh in here. I guess I haven't sat through the CPC briefing from the consultant, but I think we need to at least, the consultant may come with a predisposition to how CPC funds should be spent.
Yeah.
And I don't think the consultant is the final word on this. I
Yes,
can't begin to
exactly
appreciate
right.
the legal, right? Well, I can't begin to appreciate the legal consequences of whatever right now, but to the degree that CPC is trying to get money back, well, fine, that's on them to figure out. And just because they want to grumble to FinCom about it doesn't make it our issue to carry forward.
Well, the problem is
And-
they're not grumbling to FinCom. They're sitting here talking about making the decision themselves and then going to
Decision about
select-
what? They can't
to-
decide to take money from the town.
I understand that, but they're going to go to the select board and say, this is how you fix this. And I'm sure that the select board will do its due diligence and lay out what the options are. But I'm just saying, at this point, I think the town would be best served by having somebody research, whether it's town council or a special town council that knows about CPC, all the arcane
All right.
issues around CPC. But somebody's got to come in and sit there and say to the town, no kidding, here's what your
But we
choices
can also
are.
just reject the CPC article and see what they do about it. But
I
then
mean-
second point, on the merits of the golf course, I mean, I would somewhat differ from Ken's recollection of events. The town clearly decided we didn't want development there and thought the path of least resistance was to maintain the golf course. Now, we did that under the old assumption of, oh my God, we're going to have, 10 new students. The schools can't handle it. We're in a different climate now, and frankly, I think we may like development more than we did back then. But, I mean, the town clearly made a decision we didn't want that to be developed. Now, there's merit to what Ken says. Maybe we should revisit that decision, but I'm not quite where Ken is, that we didn't really understand or didn't fully appreciate. We clearly went into that and said, oh, great, we found a way not to have,
Yeah.
30 new houses in Maynard.
No, I would go so far as to say, it is clear that the town did not want the entire parcel developed. I agree with that. I'm not so sure that the town was clear that it could develop part of the parcel. Those portions that were along the roads.
Right, that
and
it
bring
wasn't
those-
one or the other. It
Right.
wasn't, we keep a golf course or we have
that's
a
how it
giant
was-
new development.
That
And
was,
that's,
that was how it was presented.
Yeah.
You do a golf course or you have a giant development. Nobody wanted the giant development, so let's keep the golf course. And what I'm saying is there are other options.
I think the town, I mean, generally, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I do remember some of it, and a lot of it was right. Not wanting too much development, but knowing we couldn't afford a big, giant, beautiful park. We couldn't just keep it as open space that we had to take care of because we didn't have the money to do that. So the golf course seemed like the lesser of two evils, kind of, I guess.
I mean, I also wonder how many town meeting voters utilize that golf course. Like the number one use I can think of right off the bat is like sledding
Yeah.
on the hills during winter time. But that doesn't have to be satisfied by a golf course. That could be a park or that could be something else. But I also think, as you point out, like our situation has reversed, where we were previously reluctant to grow because our schools were filling up, what have you. We're at capacity of certain things. Now we are looking down the barrel of a lot of difficult decisions, and growth is our escape hatch. Like we're going to have the water in 2 years for massive expansion of the town. Like that well that Justin found is massive. And maybe, I don't know if the will's going to take it all up, but I think, we're going to soon be like have an abundance of water, but not an abundance of land. Like there's very few land develop on remaining.
Yeah.
So we're going to have another bottleneck down the road, which is going to be land. But right now we're looking down the barrel. Like the only choice we have right now is either raise taxes significantly or cut services.
Yeah.
And that's going to be painful. Development and new growth is our escape hatch from that nightmare.
All right, any other updates from members?
I can give an update on the Collins model
Oh,
if you want.
just one second.
Oh, yeah, yep,
I'm sorry. I
Yep.
didn't mean to give the impression that I was done.
sorry.
There was another item discussed at the CPC at the, it was just preliminary and they were just contemplating. So Cuttings Nursery, AKA 182 Parker Street is going for sale. And the town has a right of first refusal on that property. So
Okay.
the CPC is contemplating exercising that right of first refusal and bringing that to town meeting voters. But from what I gather, it's in the preliminary stages. The one thing to note about the property is that it is in proximity to that brand new well. So it may not be in our interest to say like have a gas station right over that well.
True, but that's up to the
Yeah.
zoning and the planning board
Yep.
and all the people that have to approve whatever does go in there.
Yep, I'm just making a
Yep.
note.
Nope,
That was
that's-
the only thing that I asked.
Sorry, what
'cause I
was the
didn't-
address on it again? Kevin?
182 Parker Street.
Okay, thanks.
And it is, I think like the new well is like on the boundary of this property. It's somewhere in proximity to that property. I asked about
Okay.
that. Because that would be, one factor that may be in support of, on the remote chance that may be the one factor that I could think of that may be in support of the exercise of the right of first refusal is the proximity to the well. So you may not want industrial sites going there.
I was confused because I thought there was a development currently being considered by the planning board, if not.
I was
actually
gonna say
voted
it's
by-
already listed on Sotheby's
Yeah. So
as 23 acres. Does that sound right?
yeah. So yeah, it's a huge property. It's
Okay.
got it goes all the way back and encompasses, like, it has a stream on its boundary.
Yeah.
But it's the way rights of first refusal work is that you get an outside bidder come in.
Oh,
and,
okay.
And then once the bidder, once that bid is finalized and negotiated, the town then has the right to step in and match that bid. I'm just
Okay.
speculating here, but this is typically how rights of first refusal work. Is that once a buyer and seller match and come to an agreement, the town has the right to match
Correct.
any offer.
Okay, I see. I see.
That the town that the owners of this property receive for it.
Okay.
Yeah,
But again, I'm thinking, new development as the
Yeah.
escape hatch.
Looks like it's got 5 parcels possible on there.
Yeah, the road access is a little bit constricted.
Okay.
You'd probably need, you'd probably need to have some sort of lien on that outwards parcel to
Okay.
allow right of traversal or access rights to the road. Otherwise, they're
it
going to be landlocked.
It just seems crazy that we have, one of the things that, we talked about with the golf course was, having, recreational opportunities on the north side of town. We certainly don't need it on the south side of town. We've got a whole national wildlife refuge there. We don't need to.
So
Okay.
I might be biased, Ken, because I'm right in proximity, but there's the Durant Ave retention basin. There's parcel B, and then there's a whole woods right behind my house, literally. That whole woods adjacent to Rockland Ave. And
Yeah.
there's hiking trails there.
It's a nice parcel.
I hike that area more. Again, I'm biased because I live in that area. But I hike that area more than I really utilize the golf course. But that's
No,
just
I
my
wasn't trying to
personal
say there
experience.
aren't any recreational areas on the north side of town. I'm
Uh,
just saying we don't need additional
Yeah.
recreational areas on the south side of town.
Well, I don't think we
Personal
need,
opinion.
I don't think we need additional regulations on the north side. I think we have an abundance of recreational areas. But again, it might be nice to have like a sledding hill preserved
Okay.
there, but that's just.
We
my
already
personal-
have one. We already have
We
one.
did that at
the-
Coolidge.
The Coolidge.
Yeah,
Preserve that hill. Okay. Danielle, you said you had, the Collins model. Yes. I know you've
Yes.
been,
So I'm behind where I wanted to be. I wanted to be able to share out a file at this point, but I have 3 things that I'm working on that are kind of in some stage of done that is not yet ready for other people to kind of start
Well,
poking around at.
that's okay, because we're in the heat of just getting STM done. So we'll
Yeah.
probably use this right after that. So don't worry about it.
So basically, I'm taking the approach of trying to retain the existing model so that we're not breaking anything that people are used to from other towns or that Lori is used to from prior years or anything like that, so that we're not making a model that only we can use, because ultimately I don't want it to be fully on the FinCom to own this going forward, although I do want it to be useful to us and for us to be able to use it independently of whether or not anyone else is using it. So I'm trying to, one, update it for any information that we have for kind of current and past years to see where that shakes out. And I've added something in there to do that and to compare it to where the Collins model would have expected us to come out to,
Yeah.
so that we can then take a look at that and kind of see like variance analysis of did the world change, or did we have some assumptions that, maybe we should think about our assumptions differently going forward, to kind of help us figure out why we're not in the position we thought we would be in based on prior versions of this. The third thing that I'm trying to do is to kind of sit like a high level model on top of it. So basically use the detailed model to feed it in the absence of us overriding with a higher level assumptions, so that we can kind of do like a shortcut version to model out different scenarios without having to get into like that really nitty gritty. Like there's so many tabs in there where it's the level of data we're never going to get into, nor should we be getting into. But we should be able to have some sort of long range modeling that we can do on our own, and then kind of bump up against anything that we're getting from town employees. So that's where I'm at with it. Once I have something that's less like a construction zone, I'll send it over to Alana, and you can share it out just for purposes of seeing it before we can meet again to discuss.
Right. Sounds good. Thank you so much for all your work on that.
Sure. I hope it comes out to something good that we can use going forward.
Yeah.
I did notice by chance, because I was added to the charter review committee, so I'm now on that with Peter and the other members. I happened to notice that there's a part of our charter that says the town administrator is responsible for putting together a long-range financial plan. So that might be something we want to explore. I assume it hasn't been done recently due to like time constraints and kind of COVID turning everything on its head. But it does seem like we've said as a town that there's a responsibility there. So I'm hopeful that maybe even we could use like a high level version of this to start working with Greg more closely on it.
So Peter may be able to weigh in on this, but I mean, part of the problem there is it does not specify what is meant by a long range, budget plan.
There are also some overlap with our mission, because I mean our mission statement is to also understand financial trends.
No, but no, not really, because I mean, it doesn't mean that we can't develop our own plan, but he develops a plan, we could review it. But the problem is, this is something that's been discussed, is that this, the specifications about how far you go back and to what level of detail and stuff like that aren't laid out in that.
Right.
Does that overlap the master planning committee at all?
No, master.
No.
No,
Master plan doesn't have all money tied to it necessarily. It's
okay.
more visionary and what we would like to have happen, but it's not like they don't lay out how much it would cost and all of that to do it.
Visionary in sort of a science fiction sort of way.
Makes sense.
Do we have anything from the town that is any sort of long range plan though? I mean, setting aside the fact that it might not be what we want, I wasn't aware of anything that goes past be kind of a straw man for F-24.
So the Collins plan, I don't know to what degree the Collins plan relates back to what Bob McCarthy put together. But Bob McCarthy had put together sort of a long range plan. One of the problems is it didn't line up in terms of the accounts and the information and so forth with what the town was using. And so one of the things that we had worked to over time was an agreement that we would get from the town, say the past 5 years of actuals. That's easy enough. Then we would get the various budgets that Greg and the finance director were working on. So there would be different versions of, budgets, maybe an original and the latest version. And then we would base this going forward, and come up with a set of budget projections. And that we would do collaboratively with the town administrator. Now, one of the things that makes that easy is we don't have a lot of discretionary money. And so, we don't have a lot of areas where we could where we could make changes. But if we did know the levers that were there, then we would be able to do it. And the levers, would be development, overrides, and there isn't a lot that you can change in the individual budgets without significantly changing town services. So just to sort of answer your question, Danielle, is that we had gotten to a point pre-pandemic where we had gotten agreement on what the format of that budget would look like. But between the pandemic, the retirement of the finance director and the hiring of a new one, and all the other things that Greg and Lori are going through, we haven't gotten back to that point yet. And, and then add to that the fact that we had spent a bunch of money to get the Collins model. So whether we use the
Right.
Collins model, which is similar in format, or we go back to the McCarthy format, or a combination of them or something new, whatever, we know what we want to do past 5 years, current budgets, both original as well as the latest budget, and then project forward going 5 years. And that's what helped us, frankly, to understand that, at some point we were going to go off of a cliff budget wise and would need to do overrides.
So
That's something that can be shared around if it hasn't been already. I don't know that if, I know I've heard reference to it, but I don't think I've actually seen like the format or anything.
Oh, the old Bob.
Yeah, I want to make sure I'm not
Yeah.
like recreating everything that perhaps was created a couple of years ago.
Yep.
So if I can leverage any of that.
Sure.
on that topic as well, what was brought up before at our previous meeting was that that on Greg's, on the executive branch side, they are utilizing some sort of budgeting software. We're considering utilizing some budget software. I seem to recall at the last meeting, we agreed that someone would reach out and ask about that. But I'm just bringing it up because again, there's a risk that we may be reinventing the wheel here in terms of tools, that there may be a tool that we're already paying for that the executive branches are already using.
Let me follow up with Lori. She was having a meeting, I know, with the ClearGov. I think it was through ClearGov was the most latest, and what exactly we could get from our level of what we purchased from them. So I'll follow up with her. But Lori and Danielle have been in communication, so we're not, I don't think we're doing anything counter or like completely separate or in addition to things that they're doing.
Okay. I mean, is the ClearGov data, is that reliable? Is that something we could operate off of?
That is, I think, part of the discussion that she was, that moving forward, we may be, because they do, I think, have like modules built into their system.
Because I mean, I could just manually, I could access a lot of that data online. I don't know
Right.
what level, but I could potentially, extract that data. I think they even have the option to download Excel tables. I'll have to go on the website again. It's been a while
Yeah.
since the last town meeting since I was on, but
Yeah.
I think we could, I mean, if they're providing a service, I mean, they've got probably like 100, tens, if not 100 developers working on that product. And that would far outpace the capacity of this committee.
Yeah.
And if
I'll
we're
ask
already-
Lori
yeah.
what's available.
Just one thing to note in terms of how it's currently used.
Yeah.
Data goes through 2021, so it cuts off prior to what we would need.
Right.
But to your point, Alana, there's possibility that we're paying for stuff we're not yet using.
Right.
I mean, if we could
Okay.
get access to something like that, I would make very heavy use of that. I mean, it would be an invaluable tool for this committee is my position.
All right. Any other board updates before moving on? I just want to touch quickly where it's late. I want to wrap up, but we did have a correspondence and I shared it and put it on board docs concerning DPW budgeting. I have since reached out to Ms. Lally, and the PDF she was referring to is a budget presentation. It's not what actually went into the budget. And I meant to send ahead of time, but Greg sent me like the as of, the start of this fiscal year, what all the departments, their budgets were to start off with. So I'll send that along because that is public knowledge, and it clears up some of her questions. And she was very receptive, and we talked a little bit about the budgeting process, and she is hoping to get involved and moving forward for FY24, and she's happy to do that. So just wanted to follow up on that a little bit. And for discussing, I think we did a good job. Our next 2 meetings are basically STM focused for the most part. And I will get in the article sponsors that we need to have discussion, and we will be working on discussing and voting and comments for STM articles the next 2 meetings, basically. Unless there are any other super pressing topics. So that's my agenda.
I have nothing pressing. I think once we clear STM,
Yeah.
I would like to discuss doing sort of an infrastructure a census or assessment, really going around to all the departments and asking, okay, you have this building, what's the estimated lifetime of this building or this structure?
That's what we could probably do, is have a meeting with the capital planning committee, because that, as I understand it, is the kind of work that they have been doing. So I think what we might want to do is have a discussion with Capcom.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to avoid making the same mistakes that we made with the bleachers. Like, I just want to avoid that mistake again. I mean, I could understand, everyone's human, and we're all imperfect, but if we can avoid, I mean, these mistakes are painful, and this isn't the first time we've pretty much rode a structure to catastrophic failure, and it's wound up costing us. And I really think we should be looking into how can we avoid doing that in the future.
Mm-hmm. All right. So with that, I think I am all set to entertain a motion to adjourn.
I will second.
All right, I will make the motion.
I'm sorry, you were entertained.
That's okay.
Okay, I move to adjourn.
There
Sorry.
you go. You move to adjourn. Do you have a second?
I will second.
Okay, and we'll do a roll call vote. Kevin,
Aye.
Peter,
Yes.
Ken,
Yes.
Katie,
Yes.
Danielle,
Yes.
Jillian.
I will vote yes. I will also say I emailed to you directly, Madam Chair, the different scenarios that Bob had that I'm aware of, the more recent ones.
Oh, great. Thank you so much.
What was the
With
date
his
on
presentation.
what was the date on yours, Jill?
That's
Because
a
I
good
just,
question. I just pulled up my email, so.
okay. I just did the same thing. I just sent you and
okay.
Danielle something, but mine was, I think 2019.
2019, September 2019.
These are
Was
from
that-
2020. Is
Okay.
that right?
What is the? Because I was thinking we had something from 2020.
On the PowerPoint presentation is the date.
It says 2020. I will send it to everybody.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
February 8th, 2020.
Oh, right. That was the last meeting, the last, big budget meeting before
COVID.
Yep. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that. And we've had a motion to adjourn. So thank you, everybody. Good meeting. long meeting, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you.
Bye.
Good night, everybody.